My son stood in my doorway holding roses, his $1,000 suit catching the morning light. He smiled that gentle smile I used to know when he was 5 years old and said words that would shatter my world into a million pieces. Mom, my wife still sends you $5,000 every month, right? I just want to make sure you're comfortable. $5,000. My fingers went numb. The coffee cup I'd been holding slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor, brown liquid spreading across the worn linoleum like spilled blood. For 8 months, I'd been living on canned soup from the church pantry. For 8 months, I'd been rationing my blood pressure medication, cutting pills in half to make them last. For 8 months, I'd been going to bed hungry, while Clara, my millionaire son's wife, drove a brand new Mercedes and wore dresses that cost more than my yearly grocery budget. $40,000. Gone. Money I never saw. Money I never even knew existed. I looked up at David, my baby boy, who I'd raised alone after his father died, and then at Clara standing behind him in her cream silk dress and those ridiculous heels that probably cost a month of my Social Security. She was smiling. That perfect practice smile she always wore, the one that never quite reached her cold blue eyes. And in that moment, standing in my shabby kitchen with coffee pooling around my feet, I knew 3 things with absolute certainty. My son had been sending money. Clara had been stealing it. And she thought I was too old, too poor, too broken to do anything about it. She was wrong. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 67 years old. I spent 40 years as an accountant balancing books for 3 different companies, catching embezzlers and frauds who thought they were smarter than some small-town Texas woman with a calculator and a sharp eye. And if Clara Weinstein Hayes thought she could rob me blind and get away with it, she was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her privileged life. Because I wasn't just going to expose her. I was going to dismantle her entire world piece by piece, using nothing but the truth and her own greed. This is the story of how I did it. The church is helping me get by, I said quietly, watching Clara's face. They bring food packages every Tuesday. David's expression crumbled. His skin went pale, almost gray. What, Mom, you've been living on church charity? But I've been sending $5,000 every single month for 8 months. Clara handles the transfers because she said you'd be embarrassed if I did it myself. Clara's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. Calculation. She was already spinning her next lie before the first one had even been challenged. Oh, David, sweetheart. She placed one manicured hand on his shoulder, her voice dripping with syrupy concern. Your mother is getting older. Sometimes she forgets things. She turned to me, and her smile sharpened into something cruel. I've been bringing the money every month, Mrs. Hayes. Perhaps you've been misplacing it. It happens with elderly people. The memory goes, you know. The memory goes. Elderly people. She said it so smoothly, so convincingly that for a second I saw doubt flash across David's face. My own son wondering if his mother had dementia, if I was confused, if poor old Margaret had finally lost her grip on reality. I bent down slowly, my arthritic knees protesting, and started picking up the broken pieces of the coffee cup. Each shard felt sharp and real in my hands, grounding me. When I looked up, I kept my voice steady. You're absolutely right, Clara. I must be getting forgetful. I smiled at her, a smile just as fake as hers. Perhaps next time you could bring a receipt just so I can keep track. You know how we old people like our paperwork. Her eyes narrowed for just a fraction of a second. Then she laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. Of course, Mother. Whatever makes you comfortable. They didn't stay long after that. David kept glancing between us, uncertain, uncomfortable. Clara made excuses about a charity luncheon they had to attend, practically dragging him toward the door. As they left, she air-kissed near my cheek, and I caught the scent of her perfume. Chanel No. 5, $200 an ounce. I knew because she'd made sure to tell me at their wedding like I was supposed to be impressed. Take care of yourself, Mother, she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. At your age, you really should be more careful. Falls can be so dangerous. It wasn't concern. It was a threat wrapped in silk and perfume. I stood at the door and watched that silver Mercedes pull away, sunlight glinting off its perfect paint job. The car I'd never seen Clara drive to my house. The car she claimed to use for her monthly money deliveries that never happened. When the sound of the engine faded, I went back inside, walked straight to my bedroom, and pulled out the shoebox I kept under my bed. Inside were bank statements, utility bills, and a brown leather notebook David had given me for my 60th birthday, back when he still remembered birthdays, without Clara reminding him. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd done bookkeeping for 30 years, where I'd taught David his multiplication tables, where Frank and I had planned our whole life together. I opened the notebook to a fresh page and wrote 3 words at the top: follow the money. Then I picked up the phone and called First Texas Community Bank. This is Margaret Hayes. I need to speak with someone about my account, today. 45 minutes later, I was sitting across from Molly Chen, the young teller who'd helped me countless times before. She had that apologetic look people get when they're about to deliver bad news. Mrs. Hayes, I've checked your account going back a full year. There are no deposits except your Social Security on the 3rd of every month. No transfers, no cash deposits, nothing. I'd expected it, but hearing it out loud still hit like a punch to the chest. I pulled out the small notepad I'd brought with me. Molly, my son says he's been transferring $5,000 a month to me for 8 months. That money is going somewhere. Can you check if there are any other accounts under my name? Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Then she frowned. That's strange. There is another account. It was opened 8 months ago. She leaned closer to the screen, her frown deepening. But Mrs. Hayes, the signatures don't match. Look. She turned the monitor so I could see. There were 2 signatures side by side. One was mine from when Frank and I had opened our original account in 1983. The other was supposed to be mine from 8 months ago. They weren't even close. My signature had always been neat and precise, accountant careful. This one was flowing and elegant with unnecessary loops and flourishes. It was someone's idea of what an old woman's signature might look like. Someone who'd never actually seen me sign anything. That's not my signature, I said quietly. Molly's face went pale. Mrs. Hayes, that's identity theft. That's fraud. We need to report this immediately. Not yet. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the screen. Can you print me copies of everything? The fraudulent signature, the account information, all the deposits. I shouldn't, but... She looked at me, really looked at me, and saw something that made her decision. Give me 5 minutes. While she printed, I sat there piecing it together. Clara had forged my signature, opened a fake account in my name. David had been faithfully transferring $5,000 every month, thinking it was going to his poor mother. But it was going straight into Clara's pocket. $40,000, plus whatever interest it had earned. Molly came back with a thick folder. Everything's in here. Mrs. Hayes, you need to call the police. I will. But first, I need to make sure I have enough evidence that she can't talk her way out of it. I drove home with that folder on the passenger seat, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Not from fear, from rage. Pure, cold rage that Clara had looked me in the eye and called me senile while she stole money from her own husband to fund her luxury lifestyle. But I couldn't let rage drive this. Rage was messy. Rage made mistakes. I needed to be smart, calculated, patient. I needed to be the accountant who'd caught 3 embezzlers in my career and made sure every single one of them went to prison. That evening, I made a phone call to the one person I knew would understand. Reverend Cole, it's Margaret Hayes. I need your help with something, and I need you to keep it absolutely confidential. We met at St. Mary's Church the next morning in his small office that smelled like old books and furniture polish. I laid out everything: David's revelation, the bank statements, the forged signature, Clara's gaslighting. He listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. Margaret, this is a crime. Elder financial abuse. In Texas, that's a felony. I know, but I need more than bank statements. I need to prove where the money went. I need to show that Clara has been spending it. He thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. There's someone you should meet. Amelia Rowe. She practiced family law for 30 years before she retired. She still takes cases occasionally, especially involving elder abuse. She's setting up for our finance committee meeting right now. Let me get her. Amelia Rowe was tall and sharp-featured, with short steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my story, looked through the bank documents, and smiled grimly. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm going to help you destroy this woman." "I don't want to destroy her," I said carefully. "I want justice. I want my son to know the truth. I want Clara to face consequences for what she's done." "Same thing." Amelia pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we need to trace where that money went. Your son has been transferring it from his business account, right? Hayes and Partners, he owns a tech company. Good. Every company that size has a chief accountant, someone who tracks every dollar in and out. We're going to pay that person a visit." "Won't they tell David?" "Not if we approach it correctly. We're not accusing anyone. We're simply investigating a potential banking error that may have affected your son's finances. Most accountants would want to know about that." "When do we start?" Amelia checked her watch. "How about right now?" Hayes and Partners occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming downtown building that probably cost more per month than I'd spent on housing in my entire life. The lobby was all marble and chrome, with a receptionist who looked like she'd been hired for her cheekbones rather than her typing skills. "We're here to see Bennett Shaw," Amelia said, handing over her business card. "It's regarding a financial matter concerning Mr. Hayes's accounts." The receptionist's smile faltered. "Do you have an appointment?" "Tell Mr. Shaw it's about unauthorized transfers from company accounts. I think he'll want to see us immediately." 5 minutes later, we were sitting in a corner office with Bennett Shaw, a middle-aged man with gray hair and the kind of tired eyes that came from spending too many years staring at spreadsheets. He looked at Amelia's card, then at me. "Mrs. Hayes, David's mother, I've heard a lot about you." "Have you?" I kept my voice neutral. "What have you heard?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. That David worries about you. That his wife handles the financial support to make sure you're taken care of." "Is that what she told him?" I pulled out my bank statements and slid them across his desk. "Because I haven't received a single dollar." Bennett's face went pale as he looked at the statements. Then he turned to his computer and started typing rapidly. "Oh no," he whispered. "Oh God, no." "What is it?" Amelia leaned forward. "I've been processing those transfers myself. 5,000 on the 15th of every month. I thought—" He looked up at me, genuine distress in his eyes. "The account was under your name. I verified it personally. Margaret Hayes. I had no reason to question it." "Show us the account number," I said. He pulled up the information on his screen. The account number matched the fraudulent one from the bank. The name read Margaret Hayes, but the address listed was a P.O. box I'd never seen before. "This isn't my account," I said. "Someone forged my signature and opened it in my name." Bennett's hands were shaking now. "If David finds out I've been transferring money to a fake account—" "He doesn't need to know," Amelia interrupted. "Not yet. Right now we need to see where that money went. Can you print out every transaction from that account?" "I'd need a warrant for that. Bank privacy laws." "Mr. Shaw." I leaned forward, looking him straight in the eye. "Someone has been stealing from me for 8 months, stealing from my son, and I have a pretty good idea who. But I need proof. Real, solid, indisputable proof. The kind that holds up in court." He studied me for a long moment. Then he made his decision. "The bank sends monthly statements to the account holder's address. That P.O. box." He wrote down the number. If someone were to hypothetically check that P.O. box, they might find those statements, which would show every withdrawal, every purchase, every place that money went. And how would someone hypothetically access that P.O. box? Bennett smiled faintly. "The bank requires 2 forms of ID to open a P.O. box. One of them is usually a utility bill or bank statement proving residence. I'm guessing whoever opened it used your information, which means—" He pulled out a form and started filling it out. "If you go to the post office with your ID and report that someone has been fraudulently using your identity to receive mail, they'll give you access." Amelia took the form. "Mr. Shaw, you've been very helpful." "Mrs. Hayes." He stood and held out his hand. "I've worked for David for 8 years. He's a good man. He doesn't deserve to be betrayed like this, and neither do you." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, sincere. "Then help me make sure the truth comes out." "I will. But Mrs. Hayes—" He hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Clara has a company credit card. It's supposed to be for client entertainment, business expenses, that sort of thing. But lately the charges have been unusual. Unusual how? Luxury spas, designer boutiques, first-class plane tickets. Last month alone, she spent over $15,000 on personal expenses. David doesn't review those statements. He trusts her to handle the business entertainment budget." My blood went cold. "How much total—" Bennett pulled up another screen. "In the past 8 months, $73,000. $73,000, plus the $40,000 she'd stolen from my fake account. Over $100,000 that Clara had siphoned off while I ate, donated soup, and rationed my medication." "Print it," I said. "Print everything." By the time we left Hayes and Partners, we had 2 thick folders of evidence. One showed the fraudulent account and all the deposits David had made. The other showed Clara's spending spree itemized down to the last dollar. Spa treatments, designer clothes, jewelry, weekend trips to New York and Los Angeles, a down payment on that silver Mercedes. "We've got her," Amelia said as we walked to her car. "This is enough for criminal charges: elder financial abuse, identity theft, embezzlement. She's looking at serious prison time." "Not yet." I clutched the folders to my chest like treasure. "I want to see her face when she realizes she's been caught. I want David to see who he really married. I want Clara to understand exactly what she's lost." "What did you have in mind?" I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of an accountant who'd just balanced the books and found someone 50 cents short. "I'm going to invite them to dinner, a nice family dinner, and I'm going to let Clara dig her own grave." The next Sunday, I called David. "Sweetheart, I was thinking it would be nice to have you both over for dinner this weekend. I've been feeling so blessed lately, and I want to share a proper meal with my family." David sounded surprised, but pleased. "That would be great, Mom. Clara and I would love to come." "Wonderful. Oh, and David, could you ask Clara to bring the receipt from this month's money? You know the $5,000 she brought me. I want to make sure I filed it properly. You know how forgetful I'm getting." There was a pause. "Of course, Mom. I'll make sure she brings it." After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and started planning. Not just dinner, but every word, every moment, every trap I was going to set. Because Clara had made a critical mistake. She'd assumed that being old meant being stupid, that being poor meant being powerless, that being a widow meant being defeated. She was about to learn that the most dangerous opponents are the ones you underestimate. I spent the week preparing. Not just the meal, though I did make David's favorites: honey-roasted chicken garlic, mashed potatoes, apple walnut salad, and the apple pie I used to bake for his birthdays. But I also prepared the evidence, organizing it into a presentation that would be impossible to deny. I called Reverend Cole and asked him to be there. "I need a witness," I explained. "Someone impartial, someone Clara can't accuse of being biased." I called Amelia and asked her to come as well, just in case things get legal. And then I called Bennett Shaw. "I need you to bring the complete financial records. Every transfer, every credit card statement, everything. Can you do that?" "Mrs. Hayes, are you sure about this? Once you open this door?" "I'm sure. It's time for the truth." Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of lavender from my garden. I set the dining table with my best dishes, the ones Frank and I had received as wedding gifts 40 years ago. I lit candles. I put fresh flowers in a vase. Everything looked warm and welcoming and completely normal, except for the manila envelope sitting on the sideboard, thick with evidence. David and Clara arrived at 6 o'clock sharp. Clara was wearing a powder blue dress I'd never seen before, probably new, probably expensive, probably bought with my money. Her shoes were designer, her handbag was designer, her jewelry was designer. She looked like $1 million. She'd stolen over $100,000 to look that way. "Mother," She swept in, air-kissing near my cheeks. "Your home smells absolutely divine. Is that roasted chicken? David's favorite?" I smiled at my son, who was carrying a bottle of wine. "Come in, both of you. Dinner's almost ready." We made small talk while I finished setting out the food. Clara complimented the house, though her eyes skated over the worn furniture and faded curtains with barely concealed disdain. David talked about work, about a new contract they'd just landed, about how business was booming. "I'm so proud of you," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, David was still my son, still the boy I'd raised to be honest and hardworking and kind. "Your father would be so proud too." His eyes got misty. "Thanks, Mom." When we sat down to eat, I waited until everyone had full plates before I spoke. "Clara, did you remember to bring that receipt for this month's money?" She didn't even blink. "Oh, Mother, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot. I'll bring it next time, I promise." "That's all right." I took a sip of water. "Actually, I was wondering something." "David, you said you transfer the money on the 15th of every month, right?" "That's right. Same day every month, like clockwork." I turned to Clara, my smile sweet as poisoned honey. "But Clara, didn't you tell me you bring it on the 10th? The room went silent. Clara's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I don't think I said that." "You did. 3 weeks ago when you visited, you said you always bring it on the 10th because that's when you do your weekly errands." David frowned. "But honey, I transferred on the 15th. I specifically chose that day because it's right after payroll clears." Clara's smile was starting to crack. "I must have misspoken. I meant the 15th. "Interesting." I set down my fork and folded my hands. "Because if you're bringing it on the 15th and I haven't seen you on the 15th in 8 months, when exactly are you bringing this money?" "Mother, I've been bringing it every month." "You're just confused." "Am I?" I stood and walked to the sideboard, picked up the manila envelope. "Because I went to the bank this week. I checked my account very carefully. And do you know what I found?" Clara's face was going pale. David was looking between us, confusion turning to concern. "I found that I have received exactly 0 deposits in 8 months. 0. Not a single dollar from you, Clara. Not 1 penny." "That's impossible," David said, starting to stand. "I've been transferring $5,000 every month. I have the records." "Oh, the transfers are real." I opened the envelope and pulled out the first stack of papers. "You've been transferring the money like clockwork to an account under the name Margaret Hayes. The problem is, it's not my account." I laid the papers on the table, the fraudulent signature, the fake address, the account I'd never opened. "This is someone else's account opened with a forged signature and fake identification. Someone has been stealing that money for 8 months. $40,000. Gone." David stared at the papers, his face going from pale to gray. But who would—" Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor. "This is ridiculous. Mother, you're clearly confused. You probably opened that account and forgot." "Sit down, Clara." My voice was steel. "We're not done." She sat. She didn't have a choice. Because at that moment, Reverend Cole and Amelia Rowe walked in from where they'd been waiting in the kitchen. "Mrs. Hayes asked me to be here as a witness," Reverend Cole said quietly. "I think it's important that everyone hear the full truth." Amelia set her briefcase on the table. "Mr. Hayes, my name is Amelia Rowe. I'm a family law attorney. Over the past week, your mother and I have been investigating the missing funds. With the help of your chief accountant, Bennett Shaw, we've traced exactly where the money went." David looked like he'd been punched. "Bennett knows about this. He helped us gather the evidence." Amelia pulled out more papers. "Every deposit to the fraudulent account, every withdrawal, every purchase." She turned to Clara. "Would you like to explain to your husband where $40,000 went, or should we go through it line by line?" Clara's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "Let me help you," I said, my voice deadly calm. $1,500 at Neiman Marcus on July 3rd, $2,200 at the spa in Highland Park on July 15th, $3,000 for a weekend trip to New York on July 22nd. Should I continue? "Clara." David's voice was barely a whisper. What is she talking about? Clara's face was crumbling. I was going to pay it back. It was just temporary. You needed a new Mercedes. I pulled out another set of papers, $15,000 down payment made from the fraudulent account. You needed designer clothes, $8,000 at various boutiques in the past 3 months. You needed spa treatments while your mother-in-law was eating donated soup. That's not. Clara was starting to cry now, but they weren't real tears. They were calculated tears, the tears of someone who'd learned that looking vulnerable could get her out of trouble. Not this time. And it's not just the money you stole from me, I continued. Bennett also provided these. I laid out the credit card statements. Hayes and Partners corporate card, supposed to be for business expenses. You've spent $73,000 in 8 months on personal purchases. David grabbed the statements with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the pages, growing wider with each line. Clara, you told me these were client dinners, business trips. Some of them were Spa Bella in Houston, $400 for a massage and facial. That's a client dinner. The client was a woman she liked. Air France first class to Paris, $6,000 for a business trip you never mentioned. Clara was sobbing, now real tears mixing with fake ones. You don't understand. I was under so much pressure. You needed to steal from my mother. David's voice was rising, shaking with fury. I'd never heard from him before. My mother, who raised me by herself after Dad died, who worked 3 jobs to put me through college, who never asked me for a damn thing, you stole from her. I was going to pay it back. When? He slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. When were you going to pay back $113,000, Clara? When were you going to tell me you'd been forging my mother's signature and gaslighting her into thinking she was senile? Clara turned to me, her face desperate. Mother, please, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll pay it all back, every penny. Please don't do this to me. I looked at her, this woman who'd called me that old leech to her friends, who'd made me doubt my own memory, who'd stolen my name and my dignity along with my money. And I felt nothing but cold, clear certainty. You're not sorry you did it, Clara. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. Amelia opened her briefcase and pulled out a legal document. Mr. Hayes, this is a police report documenting identity theft and elder financial abuse. Your mother could file criminal charges right now. Mrs. Clara Hayes would be arrested, prosecuted, and likely sent to prison for 5 to 10 years. Clara's face went white as paper. No, please. David, don't let them. But David wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me, his eyes full of shame and pain. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I trusted her. I'm such an idiot. You're not an idiot, sweetheart. You're just a good man who wanted to believe the best in someone. I reached across the table and took his hand. That's not your fault. It's hers. What do you want to do? David asked quietly. If you want to press charges, I'll support you. Whatever you need. I looked at Clara, at her tear-streaked face and her designer dress and her trembling hands. I thought about the 8 months of poverty, the humiliation, the gaslighting. I thought about how she'd made me doubt my own mind. And then I thought about Frank, about what he would say if he were here. Justice isn't about revenge, Maggie. It's about making things right. I don't want her to go to prison, I said finally. But I want every penny back, every single dollar she stole from me, plus the money she embezzled from your company. And I want her to face consequences. Amelia nodded. We can file a civil suit, full restitution plus damages. She'll have to liquidate assets to pay it back. The Mercedes goes, I said, looking directly at Clara. The designer clothes, the jewelry, everything you bought with stolen money. You'll sell it all and return every dollar. Clara was shaking her head, sobbing. I don't have that much. Even if I sell everything, then you'll get a job. My voice was flat, merciless. A real job. And you'll work until every penny is paid back, just like I had to work, just like millions of people work every single day without stealing. David stood his face hard. I want a divorce. Clara looked up at him, mascara running down her face. David, no. Please. We can fix this. I'll change. You stole from my mother, Clara. You looked me in the eye every day for 8 months and lied. You made her think she was losing her mind. There's no coming back from that. He turned to me. Mom, I'm moving you into the house. My house. No more living alone, no more struggling. You're done with that. David, please, Mom, let me do this. Let me fix at least part of what I let happen. I looked at my son, at the man he'd become, and saw Frank in his eyes. Strong, honest, willing to make things right. All right, I said quietly, but only until I get back on my feet. Deal. Clara was still sobbing, but no one was listening anymore. Reverend Cole had pulled out his phone, calling someone, probably church members, who could help move me. Amelia was making notes on her legal pad, already building the civil case. David was holding my hand, his grip tight and apologetic and full of love. And I sat there feeling the weight of 8 months lifting from my shoulders and thought about how strange justice felt. It wasn't triumphant or glorious. It was just necessary, like balancing a book that had been off for too long. There's one more thing, I said into the silence. Everyone looked at me. Bennett mentioned that Hayes and Partners has a community outreach program, corporate charity giving. David nodded. We donate to several organizations. Why? I want to start a foundation for elderly people who've been financially exploited by family members. People like me who don't know where to turn, who are too embarrassed to ask for help. I looked at Clara. And I want the first donation to come from the money you stole, every penny of it. You took it from a poor widow. Now it's going to help other poor widows. Clara's face twisted with something between rage and despair, but she couldn't say anything. She'd lost. Completely and utterly lost. That's a beautiful idea, Mom, David said softly. We'll make it happen. That night, after Clara had been escorted out by her lawyer, after Reverend Cole and Amelia had left, after the dinner had been cleared away and the evidence packed up, I stood alone in my kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd spent 8 months rationing food, the same table where I'd planned my investigation, the same house where I'd almost lost everything. But I hadn't lost. I'd won. Not with money or power or connections, but with patience, precision, and the simple, stubborn insistence that the truth matters. My phone buzzed. A text from David. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. I promise I'll do better. I smiled and typed back, I love you too, sweetheart, and you're already doing better. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow, when I would start moving into my son's house, not as a charity case, but as a mother who'd fought for her dignity and won. When I would start planning the foundation that would help others like me. When I would wake up knowing that Clara's lies had been exposed and justice had been served. I walked to the window and looked out at my garden. The lavender Frank and I had planted 20 years ago was blooming purple and fragrant in the moonlight. Somewhere out there, Clara was probably in her lawyer's office, trying to figure out how to avoid losing everything. But she'd already lost the only thing that mattered, the ability to keep lying. I picked up my brown leather notebook and wrote one final entry for the day. The truth came out. The numbers balanced. Justice was served. And I learned that being old doesn't mean being powerless. It just means being patient enough to wait for liars to trap themselves. Then I closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and went to bed. For the first time in 8 months, I slept soundly, with no worries about money or food or dignity. Because I'd proven something important, not just to Clara or David, but to myself. A woman who spent 40 years balancing books knows that eventually everything has to add up. And when it doesn't, when someone's cooking the books and stealing from the till, that woman knows exactly how to catch them. Clara had gambled that I was too old, too poor, too broken to fight back. She'd bet wrong. And now she was going to spend the next few years paying for that mistake, one honest dollar at a time. The numbers, as I'd always known, never lie. And neither do I. The morning after the confrontation, I woke up at 5:30, like always, my body still running on the schedule of someone who couldn't afford to sleep late. For a moment, lying there in the gray pre-dawn light, I wondered if last night had been a dream. But then I saw the manila envelope on my dresser, still thick with evidence, and I knew it was real. Clara had been exposed. David knew the truth, and today everything would change. My phone buzzed. A text from David sent at 5:15. "Can't sleep. Coming over at 7 with coffee and boxes. We're moving you today." I stared at that message for a long time. Moving day. After 10 years in this house alone after Frank's death had left every room echoing with memories I was leaving. Not because I was being evicted or because I'd failed, but because my son wanted me safe. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt restless, like there was something unfinished. The doorbell rang at exactly 7. David stood there with 2 large coffees and the kind of hollow-eyed exhaustion that comes from a night spent staring at the ceiling. Behind him, a moving truck sat in my driveway. "You didn't have to rush," I said, taking the coffee. "Yeah, I did." He came inside, looked around the small living room like he was seeing it for the first time. "Mom, how long has that ceiling been leaking?" I glanced at the water stain I'd stopped noticing months ago. "A while." "Jesus Christ." He ran a hand through his hair. "I should have visited more. I should have seen you were busy building a life. That's what you're supposed to do. Not at the expense of letting you live like this." He set his coffee down and turned to face me. "I talked to my lawyer last night. Clara's already trying to negotiate." "That was fast." "Her family has money. They lawyered up within an hour of her leaving." His jaw tightened. "They're offering to pay back the $40,000 you're owed plus $50,000 for damages, in exchange for no criminal charges and an NDA. An NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Basically, they want to pay you to shut up about what happened." I sat down slowly, processing this. Clara's family wanted to buy my silence, to bury this whole mess under a pile of money, so their daughter's reputation stayed clean. "What did you tell them?" "I told them to go to hell." David's voice was flat, cold. "But Mom, it's your decision. If you want to take the money and be done with it, I'll understand." I sipped my coffee thinking, $90,000 would change my life. New roof, new car security for my remaining years. All I had to do was promise never to tell anyone how Clara had robbed me, gaslit me, made me question my own sanity. "No," I said quietly. David blinked. "No. I don't want their hush money. I want Clara to face real consequences, and I want every penny she stole to go into that foundation I mentioned, the one that helps other elderly people. Mom, $90,000 is exactly what she's hoping will make me go away." I set down my coffee cup. "David, do you know how many other women like me are out there? Women whose children or daughters-in-law or caregivers are stealing from them? Women who are too ashamed or too scared to speak up? A lot, probably. More than a lot. And most of them don't have a son who's a millionaire or a lawyer who'll take their case. They just suffer in silence until there's nothing left to take." I looked at him. "If I accept that NDA, I'm telling every one of those women that dignity has a price tag, that the truth doesn't matter as much as money." David was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, and it was the first real smile I'd seen from him in years. "Dad would be really proud of you right now." "Your dad would be proud of you too, for wanting to make this right." The movers arrived at 8'3" burly guys who moved through my house like a surgical team. I watched them pack up 40 years of life into cardboard boxes, each one labeled in black marker kitchen. Bedroom, books, photos. By noon, the house was empty, except for the furniture I was leaving behind. The table where Frank and I had shared thousands of meals. The couch where I'd nursed David through childhood fevers. The rocking chair where I'd sat alone after Frank died, trying to figure out how to keep breathing. "You okay, Mom?" David appeared beside me. "Just saying goodbye." "We can take the furniture if you want." I shook my head. "Let it stay. Maybe the next family will need it more than I do." We locked up the house at 2 in the afternoon. I stood on the porch one last time, key in hand, and thought about the woman I'd been when Frank and I bought this place. Young, hopeful, full of dreams about the life we'd build together. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone harder, sharper, someone who'd learned that survival meant fighting even when you were tired, especially when you were tired. David's house was everything my old home wasn't. Glass and steel and open spaces that seemed to go on forever. The guest room he'd prepared for me was bigger than my entire living room had been, with its own bathroom and a walk-in closet and windows that overlooked a pool I'd never use. "It's too much," I said. "It's not enough." David set down the last box. "Mom, I'm going to the office for a few hours. Make yourself at home. The kitchen is fully stocked. The TV remote is on the counter, and if you need anything, just call." After he left, I wandered through the house like a ghost, touching expensive furniture and staring at abstract art I didn't understand. Everything was perfect, sterile, untouched. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a magazine spread. I missed my leaking ceiling. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Hayes." A woman's voice, cultured and cold. "This is Patricia Weinstein, Clara's mother." I sat down on David's leather couch. "Mrs. Weinstein, I wanted to speak with you directly, woman to woman. My daughter made a mistake." "Your daughter committed a felony." There was a pause. "Yes, she did, and she's deeply sorry." "No, she's deeply caught." Another pause, longer this time. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had hardened. "Mrs. Hayes, let me be frank. Our family has considerable resources and influence. If you pursue criminal charges, we will fight you. We will drag this through court for years. We will make it expensive, exhausting, and public." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality. Litigation is costly, Mrs. Hayes. Can you afford that? Even with David's support, do you really want to spend your remaining years in courtrooms and depositions?" I thought about my brown leather notebook, about the evidence I'd collected about Bennett and Amelia and Reverend Cole, about the truth that I'd fought so hard to expose. "Mrs. Weinstein, I'm 67 years old. I've buried a husband, raised a son alone, and survived 10 years on Social Security. Your daughter stole $100,000 from me and my son, then tried to convince him I was senile. And now you're calling to tell me the truth is too expensive. I'm calling to offer you a way out. Take the settlement, sign the NDA, move on with your life." "Here's my counteroffer," I said calmly. "Clara returns every penny she stole. Every penny. She sells the Mercedes, the designer clothes, the jewelry, all of it. The money goes into a foundation for elder abuse victims. She completes a financial rehabilitation program, and she apologizes publicly." "That's ridiculous. She'd be humiliated." "Good. Maybe humiliation will teach her something that money never did." "You're making a mistake." "I've made plenty of mistakes, Mrs. Weinstein. Trusting your daughter was one of them. But demanding justice, that's not a mistake. That's called having a spine." I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Patricia Weinstein had tried to intimidate me, to make me believe that the truth was too expensive to pursue. But she'd forgotten something important. I had nothing left to lose. Clara had already taken everything she could. What was I supposed to be afraid of now? The phone rang again immediately. This time it was Amelia. "Margaret, I just got a very aggressive call from the Weinstein family attorney. They're threatening to bury us in paperwork if we don't take the settlement." "Let them try. It's going to get ugly." "It's already ugly, Amelia. They just want to hide it." She laughed. "I was hoping you'd say that, because I may have found something interesting. Remember how we traced Clara's spending? Well, I kept digging. Turns out our girl has been very busy." "Busy how?" "She opened 3 credit cards in your name, used your Social Security number, and forged your signature. The total debt, $62,000. The room tilted. $62,000. Luxury goods mostly. Jewelry, handbags, shoes, all purchased over the past year, well before she started stealing the monthly transfers from David. Margaret, this wasn't opportunistic. This was systematic fraud. She's been planning this for a long time." A year. Clara had been stealing my identity and ruining my credit for an entire year before she ever started intercepting David's money. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was calculated, deliberate theft. "Can we prove it?" I asked. Already got the credit card statements and the forged applications. The signatures don't even come close to matching yours. She got sloppy probably because she thought you'd never check. Add it to the case. This changes everything, Margaret. We're not just talking about elder financial abuse anymore. This is full-scale identity theft. The federal government takes this very seriously. We're looking at potential federal charges now, not just state. How long could she go to prison? With the identity theft charges added, 10 to 15 years, maybe more if the prosecutor wants to make an example. I closed my eyes. 10 to 15 years. Clara would be in her mid-40s when she got out, her youth and beauty gone, her life completely derailed. Part of me, the part that had eaten donated soup while Clara wore stolen jewelry, felt satisfied. She deserved it. She'd earned every year of that sentence. But another part of me, the part that remembered being a young woman myself, once felt something like pity. I need to think about this, I said. Don't think too long. The statute of limitations doesn't run forever. After we hung up, I sat in David's perfect living room and stared at his perfect view and thought about revenge versus justice. They weren't the same thing, no matter how much they felt like it in the moment. Revenge was hot and satisfying and temporary. Justice was cold and permanent and complicated. Frank used to say that the best punishment for a thief wasn't prison. It was making them work honestly for the first time in their lives, making them understand the value of what they'd stolen by earning it back dollar by dollar, hour by hour. But Frank had never been robbed by his own family. David came home at 6 with takeout from some expensive restaurant I'd never heard of. We ate in his kitchen, which had more counter space than my entire house had floor space. "Your phone's been buzzing all day," he said. "Everything okay?" "Clara's mother called, threatened to bury us in litigation if we don't take the settlement." David's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Patricia called you directly. Apparently, intimidating old ladies runs in the family." "What did you say?" I told her no. Then Amelia called and told me Clara's been stealing my identity for over a year. $62,000 in credit card fraud. David set down his fork. "How much total now?" $175,000, give or take. He was quiet for a long moment. "Mom, I need to tell you something. After you went to bed last night, I went through our joint accounts. Clara and I have been married for 3 years. In that time, she's transferred almost $400,000 out of our shared investments." 400,000. The number was so big, it didn't even sound real. "Where did it go?" "Offshore accounts mostly, places I can't easily trace. My lawyer thinks she's been planning to leave me for a while. The money she stole from you was just pocket change compared to what she took from us." "David, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. You tried to warn me. At the wedding, remember? You said something felt off about her." I did remember. I'd mentioned it once carefully, and David had gotten defensive. He'd accused me of being jealous, of not wanting him to be happy. "I should have pushed harder," I said. "I wouldn't have listened. I was in love, or I thought I was. Looking back, I don't think I ever really knew her, the real her. I just knew the version she wanted me to see. That's what con artists do. They show you what you want to see. She was good at it." He pushed his food around his plate. "I keep thinking about all the times she said you were forgetful, that you were getting old and confused. I believed her, Mom. I actually believed she was taking care of you when she was robbing you blind. She's a liar. Liars are convincing. That's their job." "But I'm your son. I should have known." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You're a good man who wanted to believe the best about the woman you married. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human." We sat there in silence for a while, holding hands across his expensive table, two people trying to figure out how to move forward when trust had been shattered. Finally, David spoke. "What do you want to do about the charges, I mean? It's your call, Mom. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." I thought about Clara, about her perfect smile and her designer clothes and her casual cruelty, about how she'd looked at me in my shabby house and seen someone disposable, someone whose dignity didn't matter because she was old and poor and alone. I thought about the $62,000 in fraudulent credit cards, the $100,000 from the bank account, the $400,000 from David, over $500,000 stolen from people who'd trusted her. And I thought about all the other victims out there, The ones who weren't as lucky as me, who didn't have a lawyer or a detective or a son who believed them. The ones who'd been robbed and gaslit and destroyed their final years spent in poverty while their abusers lived in luxury. "I want to make a deal," I said. David frowned. "What kind of deal?" "Clara pays back every penny to both of us. She sells everything she bought with stolen money. The proceeds go into the foundation we're starting. She completes a mandatory financial rehabilitation program and does community service. 5 years minimum. Working with elderly abuse victims, listening to their stories, understanding what she did. And if she agrees to all that, we pursue civil charges, but not criminal. She doesn't go to prison, but she spends the next 5 years paying back her debt and learning what it means to actually work for a living." David studied me. "That's more generous than she deserves." "Maybe, but prison won't teach her anything except how to be a better criminal. This way she has to face what she did. She has to look at people like me, people she hurt, and understand that we're human beings, not just sources of money." "You're assuming she's capable of learning." "I'm assuming I'd rather spend my remaining years building something good instead of watching her rot in a cell." I squeezed his hand. "Frank used to say the best revenge is forcing people to become better versions of themselves. I'd like to try that, just once, see if it works." David smiled sadly. Dad was always too optimistic. Maybe, but he was also usually right. The next morning, Amelia called an emergency meeting at her office. David and I sat on one side of a large conference table. Across from us sat Clara, her mother Patricia, and 2 lawyers who probably cost more per hour than I used to make in a month. Clara looked terrible. No makeup, hair pulled back, wearing jeans and a plain shirt. I'd never seen her dressed so simply. She looked younger, smaller, almost human. "Mrs. Hayes," the lead lawyer began, "my client is prepared to offer full restitution." "I have conditions," I interrupted. Everyone looked at me. "Clara returns all stolen funds to both me and David. That's $175,000 to me and $400,000 to my son. She liquidates all assets purchased with stolen money. Every penny goes into a foundation I'm establishing for elder financial abuse victims." "That's acceptable," the lawyer said quickly. "I'm not finished. Clara completes a court-mandated financial rehabilitation program. She performs 500 hours of community service working with elderly abuse victims. She writes a public apology that I approve before it's published, and she submits to a 5-year probationary period during which she has no access to anyone's finances but her own, including no credit cards, no joint accounts, no authority over anyone's money." Clara's face was pale. Her mother's face was red. "Those terms are excessive," Patricia started. "Those terms are generous," Amelia cut in. "My client is offering to forego criminal prosecution on charges that carry a 15-year minimum sentence. Identity theft is a federal crime, Mrs. Weinstein. Your daughter would be in federal prison." "Clara," I looked directly at her for the first time. "Do you understand what you did to me?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, "I thought you wouldn't notice." "You thought I wouldn't notice $100,000? I thought you were just some old woman who didn't matter anymore." Tears started running down her face. "I thought I could take it and you'd never know. And even if you found out, who would believe you? You were poor and old and therefore worthless." She flinched. "I didn't think of it like that." "Yes, you did. That's exactly how you thought of it." I leaned forward. "Clara, do you have any idea what it's like to ration medication because you can't afford the full dose? To eat donated food because groceries are too expensive? To wake up every morning wondering which bill you won't be able to pay? No. Then you're going to learn. You're going to spend 500 hours listening to women who do know. Women you could have been helping instead of robbing. And you're going to understand, really understand, that being old doesn't mean being disposable." Clara was crying openly now, but I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt tired. "Do we have a deal?" Amelia asked. The lawyers conferred in whispers. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but one of the lawyers put a hand on her arm, shook his head slightly. This was the best offer they were going to get. "We accept the terms," the lead lawyer said finally. "We'll have the paperwork drawn up by end of business today." "One more thing," David said, speaking for the first time. "I want a divorce. Uncontested, immediate, and you get nothing. No alimony, no settlement, nothing. You took enough." Clara looked at him. "David, please. I know I made mistakes." "You didn't make mistakes. You committed crimes. Against my mother, against me, against everyone who trusted you." His voice was flat, empty. "Sign the divorce papers, Clara. It's over." She nodded slowly, her shoulders shaking with sobs. We left them there in that conference room. Patricia was trying to comfort her daughter. The lawyers were already typing on their laptops, drawing up the agreements that would define Clara's next 5 years. In the elevator, David let out a long breath. "I can't believe that's really over." "It's not over," I said. "It's just beginning. Now comes the hard part." "What's the hard part?" "Building something good from all this mess." That evening, we sat in David's living room with Amelia and Bennett Shaw, who'd agreed to help set up the foundation. Reverend Cole joined us via video call, his face pixelated, but his voice clear. "We need a name," Amelia said, pen poised over her legal pad. "Grace Hands Foundation," I said immediately. Because sometimes justice requires extending grace, and sometimes grace requires strong hands. Everyone was quiet for a moment. Then Reverend Cole smiled. "Frank would have loved that." "He would have hated everything that led to it," I said. "But yes, he would have loved the idea." We spent 3 hours planning. The foundation would provide legal assistance to elderly victims of financial abuse. We'd offer financial counseling help with credit repair advocacy with banks and credit card companies. We'd train social workers and law enforcement to recognize signs of elder abuse. And most importantly, we'd create a support network so victims knew they weren't alone. "The first donation will be substantial," Bennett said, looking at his laptop. "Between what we'll recover from Clara and David's corporate matching program, we're looking at close to $1 million in seed money. $1 million, born from theft and betrayal, but transformed into something that would help people." "How many people can we help with that?" I asked. "Conservatively, 100 cases in the first year. Maybe more if we can attract other donors." 100 people who wouldn't have to go through what I went through. 100 families saved from Clara's particular brand of cruelty. "When can we start?" David asked. "As soon as the legal paperwork is finalized. 2 weeks, maybe 3. After everyone left, David and I sat on his back patio watching the sunset over his pool that I still hadn't used. The Texas sky was doing that thing it does, turning pink and orange and purple all at once, like it couldn't decide which color it wanted to be. "Mom," David said quietly, "thank you." "For what?" "For being strong enough to fight back. For not just taking the settlement and letting Clara disappear. For turning something awful into something good." He paused. "And for forgiving me for being an idiot. You weren't an idiot. You were in love. I should have visited more. I should have noticed you were struggling. I should have—" "Stop." I put my hand on his arm. "The should-haves will eat you alive if you let them. What matters is what we do from here." "What do we do from here?" I thought about that question, about the foundation we were building, about the house I'd left behind, and the new life I was starting. About Clara, who would spend 5 years learning that other people weren't just obstacles or opportunities, but actual human beings with dignity. "We do better," I said finally. "We pay attention. We help people who need it. We make sure no one else goes through what I went through." I looked at him. "And we remember that being rich or successful or powerful doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just means you have more responsibility to do the right thing." David nodded slowly. "Dad taught you that." "No, poverty taught me that. Frank just reminded me not to forget it." We sat there until the sky finished its color show and faded to black. Stars started appearing, tiny pinpricks of light in the darkness. I thought about how much had changed in just a few days, how I'd gone from a forgotten widow to a woman with a mission, how Clara had gone from a thief to someone who would have to earn redemption, how David had gone from an oblivious son to someone determined to make amends. None of it was perfect. Clara might never really change. The foundation might help some people, but not others. David and I would probably always carry some guilt and regret about what happened, but it was better than silence, better than accepting defeat, better than letting Clara win, because fighting back seemed too hard. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Clara. I know I don't deserve to say this, but thank you for not sending me to prison. I'll spend every day of the next 5 years proving I can be better. I promise." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Don't promise me anything. Prove it through your actions. That's the only promise that matters." I deleted her number and put my phone away. Tomorrow I would start working with Amelia on the foundation paperwork. I would help interview potential staff members. I would reach out to other organizations that helped elderly abuse victims. I would learn everything I could about turning pain into purpose. But tonight I would sit here with my son and watch the stars and let myself feel something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not the naive hope of someone who thinks everything will be fine, but the hard-earned hope of someone who knows that even in the darkest times, you can still light a candle, even if your hands shake while you're doing it. 3 weeks later, I stood in a small office space on the 3rd floor of a building near downtown Dallas, watching workers install a sign on the glass door. Grace Hands Foundation. The letters were simple, professional, exactly what we'd envisioned. "It's really happening," Amelia said beside me, her arms full of file folders. "We officially open next Monday." "Are we ready?" "No, but we're doing it anyway." The office was modest. 3 desks, 2 filing cabinets, a small waiting area with chairs that David had donated from his company's old furniture. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just functional space where people could come and tell their stories without feeling intimidated. My phone rang. "Bennett." "Margaret, we have a problem. Clara's first community service assignment starts tomorrow, and the coordinator just called. Clara's refusing to show up unless her lawyer is present." I closed my eyes and counted to 5. "Put the coordinator on speaker." A woman's voice came through, harried and annoyed. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Diana Chen from Senior Services. I've had 3 calls from Clara's attorney this morning claiming the community service requirements violate her civil rights. What's she supposed to be doing? Helping at a senior center, serving lunch, listening to residents' basic companionship work. Nothing physically demanding or humiliating. And she's refusing. Her lawyer says she needs time to mentally prepare, that forcing her to interact with elderly people is traumatic given the circumstances. I felt my blood pressure rising. "Diana, can you transfer me to Clara's lawyer?" 2 minutes later, I was talking to Michael Brennan, the smooth-voiced attorney who'd negotiated Clara's deal. "Mrs. Hayes, my client is willing to fulfill her obligations, but she needs accommodations. Your client agreed to 500 hours of community service. The agreement doesn't say anything about accommodations or lawyers being present or mental preparation time. Mrs. Hayes, surely you can understand that this situation is difficult for Clara." "Difficult?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Do you know what's difficult, Mr. Brennan? Being 67 years old and eating donated soup because someone stole your money. That's difficult. Having your own son doubt your sanity because his wife is gaslighting you. That's difficult. Your client sitting in an air-conditioned office while I explain why she needs to honor her commitments. That's not difficult. That's Tuesday." Silence on the other end. "Clara will report to Senior Services tomorrow at 9 a.m., I continued. "She will serve lunch, she will listen to residents, and she will do it without a lawyer holding her hand. If she fails to show up, I will personally call the district attorney and tell them we're pursuing criminal charges after all. Do we understand each other?" "Mrs. Hayes, do we understand each other, Mr. Brennan?" A long pause. "Yes, she'll be there." I hung up and found Amelia staring at me with something like awe. "Remind me never to steal from you," she said. "Too late. You already stole my heart by helping me." She laughed, and some of the tension broke. But I was still angry, still fighting the urge to call David and tell him this whole grace and redemption thing was a mistake. Clara hadn't changed. She was just trying to find new ways to avoid consequences. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Diana Chen. Clara just called. She'll be there tomorrow. Thank you." Small victory, but it felt hollow. That evening, David invited me to dinner at an Italian place downtown. When I arrived, I found him sitting with a woman I didn't recognize. She was around 50 with kind eyes and graying hair pulled into a neat bun. "Mom, this is Dr. Sarah Wu. She's a gerontologist who specializes in elder abuse cases. I thought you two should meet." We shook hands. Dr. Wu's grip was firm, confident. "Your son told me about your foundation," she said as we sat down. "I've been working in this field for 20 years and I can't tell you how badly we need something like this." "How bad is it?" I asked. "The elder abuse situation, I mean. Worse than most people realize. We estimate 1 in 10 seniors experiences some form of financial abuse, but that's just reported cases. The real number is probably closer to 1 in 5. 1 in 5. Financial exploitation of the elderly is the fastest growing form of elder abuse in America, and it's usually perpetrated by family members, children, grandchildren, caregivers, people the victims trust. I thought about Clara, about how easily she'd stolen from me because I trusted her to be decent, because family was supposed to mean something. "Why don't people report it?" I asked. "Shame, mostly. They're embarrassed that their own family would steal from them. They blame themselves for being too trusting, and often they're financially dependent on the abuser, so reporting means losing their caregiver or their housing." "How do we help them?" Dr. Wu pulled out her phone and showed me statistics charts, case studies. An 80-year-old woman whose grandson emptied her retirement account. A 75-year-old man whose daughter forged his signature on a reverse mortgage. A 90-year-old widow whose live-in caretaker stole her jewelry and sold it online. Story after story of betrayal, each one a variation on what had happened to me. The foundation can provide legal support, financial counseling, and most importantly, validation, Dr. Wu said. These victims need someone to tell them it's not their fault, that they have rights, that they don't have to suffer in silence. "Will you help us?" I asked. "We need someone who understands the medical and psychological aspects." "I'd be honored." We spent 2 hours over pasta and wine planning programs and discussing strategies. Dr. Wu knew social workers, lawyers, financial advisors, all people who might want to join our cause. By the time dinner ended, I felt energized in a way I hadn't felt in years. This was bigger than me and Clara. This was about changing a system that allowed vulnerable people to be exploited by those they trusted most. "Mom, you're glowing," David said as we walked to the parking lot. "I feel useful again, like I have a purpose beyond just surviving." "Dad would be so proud. Dad would probably say I'm being too idealistic and should charge consulting fees." David laughed. "Yeah, he would." On Monday morning, Grace Hand's Foundation officially opened. We'd advertised in senior centers, churches, and community centers across Dallas. I didn't know if anyone would show up. By 10 a.m., 12 people were sitting in our waiting area. The first was an elderly black woman named Dorothy Jenkins, 78 years old, wearing her Sunday best, even though it was Monday. She clutched a worn purse and wouldn't make eye contact. "Mrs. Jenkins?" I said gently, leading her to my desk. "What brings you here today?" "I don't know if you can help me." Her voice was barely a whisper. "My grandson, he's been taking money from my account. Says he needs it for school, but I saw him driving a new car." "How much has he taken?" "I don't know exactly. Maybe $30,000 over 2 years. He has my ATM card because I can't see well enough to use the machine anymore." I pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. "Mrs. Jenkins, what you're describing is financial exploitation. It's a crime and we can help you." Tears started running down her face. "He's my grandson. I helped raise him. I can't send him to jail." "We're not going to send anyone to jail unless that's what you want. But we can help you protect your money and set boundaries. You don't have to choose between loving your grandson and protecting yourself." She looked up at me, really looked at me, and I saw myself reflected in her eyes. Another old woman betrayed by someone she loved, trying to figure out how to survive without destroying her family. "Can I tell you what happened to me?" I asked. For the next hour, I told Dorothy my story. About Clara and the stolen money and the gaslighting and the choice I'd made to pursue justice without sending her to prison. Dorothy listened, occasionally nodding, wiping her eyes. "You really forgave her?" she asked when I finished. "I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others, but I decided that holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting her. But she has to pay you back. Every penny. And she has to work with people like you, listening to their stories, understanding the damage she caused. That's her punishment, and hopefully her education. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I don't want my grandson to go to jail either, but I can't keep living like this, scared to check my bank account, scared to say no to him. Then let's help you set up protections. We'll work with the bank to require dual signatures for withdrawals. We'll get you connected with a financial counselor who can help you manage your money. And if you want, we can arrange a mediation session where you can talk to your grandson with a neutral third party present. You can do all that. That's why we're here. By the end of the day, we'd seen 8 clients. Each story was different, but somehow the same. Adult children draining parents' accounts, caregivers forging signatures, financial advisors manipulating confused seniors into bad investments. A catalog of betrayal and exploitation that made Clara's crimes look almost ordinary. This is overwhelming, Amelia said after the last client left. We're going to need more staff. Add it to the list. My phone rang. Clara's community service coordinator. Mrs. Hayes, I wanted to give you an update on Clara's first day. I braced myself. How bad was it? Actually, it wasn't bad at all. She showed up on time, served lunch without complaint, and spent 2 hours sitting with a 90-year-old woman named Ethel, who hasn't had a visitor in months. I blinked. Really? Ethel told me afterward that Clara listened to her whole life story. Marriage kids, grandkids who never visit, losing her husband to Alzheimer's. Clara even cried when Ethel talked about feeling invisible. Clara cried, "Real tears, Mrs. Hayes, not performative ones. I've been doing this work for 15 years. I can tell the difference." After we hung up, I sat there trying to process this information. Clara had actually shown up and done the work and connected with someone. It didn't erase what she'd done, didn't make me forgive her, but it was something, maybe a start. That evening, David came by the office to help me lock up. He found me sitting at my desk, staring at Dorothy Jenkins's intake form. "Long day?" he asked. "Long life?" I gestured at the stack of files on my desk. 8 people today, David. 8 people stolen from by their own families, and that's just day 1. We can't save everyone, Mom. I know, but we can try to save someone. He sat down across from me. Clara's lawyer called. She wants to write you a letter. Apparently meeting Ethel today affected her. I don't want her letters. I told him that, but he said Clara's insisting. She wants you to know that she met someone today who reminded her of you. An old woman alone, forgotten by her family, grateful for 5 minutes of someone's attention. Good. Maybe she's starting to understand. Are you ever going to forgive her? I thought about that question, about forgiveness and what it really meant. Was it letting go of anger, accepting what happened, deciding someone deserved a second chance? I don't know. I said honestly. Ask me in 5 years when her community service is done. Maybe by then I'll have an answer. The next few weeks blurred together in a rhythm of intake interviews, legal consultations, and crisis management. Grace Hand's Foundation was busier than we'd ever imagined. We hired 2 part-time social workers and a receptionist. Dr. Wu volunteered 10 hours a week. Reverend Cole organized a network of churches to help with emergency financial assistance. And every week, like clockwork, I got updates on Clara's community service. Week 2, Clara organized a birthday party for a veteran who turned 93 with no family present. Week 3, Clara spent her lunch break teaching a stroke survivor how to use a smartphone to video chat with distant grandchildren. Week 4. Clara started a book club at the senior center, reading aloud to residents with vision problems. She's actually good at this, Diana Chen told me during one of our check-in calls. The residents love her. She's patient, kind, genuinely interested in their stories. That's what makes good con artists, I said. They're good at seeming interested. Mrs. Hayes, with respect, I don't think she's conning anyone. I think she's discovering empathy for the first time in her life. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that Clara was genuinely changing, that grace and redemption could actually work. But I'd been fooled before. Time will tell, was all I said. 2 months into running the foundation, we got our first major success story. Dorothy Jenkins's grandson agreed to enter a financial rehabilitation program in exchange for Dorothy not pressing charges. He paid back $15,000, set up automatic deposits to repay the rest, and wrote his grandmother an apology letter that made her cry. He said he was sorry, Dorothy told me, clutching the letter like it was made of gold. He said he never realized how much he was hurting me. He just saw money, not his grandmother's security. Do you believe him? I want to, and now with the account protections you helped me set up, I can want to believe him without risking everything. That was the key I realized, not forcing victims to choose between love and safety, but helping them find ways to have both. The local news caught wind of what we were doing and wanted to interview me. I refused 3 times before David convinced me to do it. Mom, if you want to help more people, they need to know you exist. One interview could reach thousands of victims who don't know where to turn. So I sat in my office while a reporter named Jessica Torres set up cameras and asked me questions about elder financial abuse. Mrs. Hayes, what made you decide to start this foundation? I told her about Clara, about the stolen money, about feeling invisible and disposable. I told her about the choice I'd made to pursue justice without vengeance, about turning pain into purpose. So you forgave your daughter-in-law? Jessica asked. I made peace with what happened. That's not the same as forgiveness, but it's something. What would you say to other seniors who are being exploited by family members? I looked directly at the camera. I'd say it's not your fault. You didn't fail by trusting someone you love. They failed by betraying that trust. And I'd say you have options. You don't have to suffer in silence. There are people who will believe you, who will help you, who will stand with you while you fight for your dignity. The interview aired that night. By morning, our phone was ringing off the hook. 53 calls in one day. 53 people who'd seen themselves in my story and wanted help. We can't handle this volume, Amelia said, looking overwhelmed. We need more staff, bigger space, more funding. David was already on his phone. I'm calling some business contacts. If each of them donates $50,000, we can expand immediately. David, that's asking a lot. Mom, we turned away 20 people today because we didn't have capacity. 20 people who need help. That's unacceptable. Within a week, David had raised $300,000 in donations. We moved to a larger office, hired 4 more staff members, and partnered with a law school to provide pro bono legal services. Grace Hand's Foundation went from a small operation to a legitimate organization helping dozens of people every week. And through it all, Clara kept showing up for her community service. 4 months in, Diana Chen called with an update that surprised me. Clara asked if she could increase her hours. She wants to do 20 hours a week instead of 10. Why? She says working with the seniors helps her understand what she did, that every story she hears is another reminder of the damage she caused. She wants to do more to make up for it. What do you think? Is it genuine? Diana hesitated. I think she's horrified by who she used to be. Whether that translates into permanent change, I don't know. But the horror seems real. That weekend, I did something I'd been avoiding for months. I drove to the senior center where Clara volunteered and watched her through the window. She was sitting with an elderly man helping him write a letter. Her head was bent close to his, listening carefully as he dictated words to a son who'd stopped calling. She wrote slowly, making sure every word was right, and when the man's voice broke with emotion, Clara's hand covered his. It wasn't performative. There were no cameras, no audience, no one to impress, just Clara and an old man, and a moment of genuine human connection. I drove home feeling confused, angry that Clara was becoming likable while I was still dealing with the trauma she'd caused, frustrated that redemption looked possible when I wanted her to stay villainous, exhausted by the complicated reality that people could be terrible and then maybe become less terrible. That night, I called Dr. Wu. Sarah, how do you forgive someone who's genuinely trying to change but hasn't earned it yet? She was quiet for a moment. You don't forgive them for their sake. You forgive them for yours, because holding on to anger takes energy you could be using for better things. But if I forgive her, doesn't that minimize what she did? No. Forgiveness doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means you're choosing not to let it define the rest of your life. I don't know if I can do that. You don't have to decide today, or tomorrow, or next year. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's a process. Sometimes you wake up and the anger is lighter. Sometimes it comes roaring back. Both are okay. 5 months into the foundation's operation, we held our first major fundraiser. David rented out a hotel ballroom, invited his business contacts, and convinced me to give a speech. I stood at the podium looking at 200 people in formal wear, people who donated money to help strangers they'd never meet, and I told them why it mattered. My daughter-in-law stole $100,000 from me and my son. She made me question my sanity, my worth, my right to exist with dignity. But in the process of fighting back, I learned something important. I'm not unique. What happened to me happens to thousands of elderly people every single day, and most of them suffer in silence because they're ashamed or scared or don't know where to turn. I paused, looking around the room. 6 months ago, I was eating donated soup and wondering if I mattered anymore. Today, I run a foundation that's helped over 80 people reclaim their money, their dignity, and their peace of mind. That transformation didn't happen because I'm special. It happened because I refused to accept that being old means being disposable. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was looking at the back of the room where Clara stood wearing a simple black dress, tears streaming down her face. She'd come to the fundraiser. Why? After my speech, she approached slowly, like she was afraid I'd run. Mrs. Hayes, I know I don't have the right to be here. Then why are you? Because I wanted to see what I almost destroyed. You could have given up. You could have just taken the money and disappeared. But instead you built this. She gestured around the room. You turned what I did into something that helps people. That's... Her voice broke. That's what I should have been doing all along. Yes, it is. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be someone who builds instead of takes. I know you don't believe me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that meeting Ethel and Dorothy and all the others, hearing their stories, understanding that they're real people with real pain, it changed something in me. People don't change, Clara. Not really. Maybe not completely, but maybe enough to matter. She wiped her eyes. I wrote you something. I was going to mail it, but since I'm here... She handed me an envelope. You don't have to read it. You can throw it away if you want. I just needed to write it. She walked away before I could respond. I stood there holding the envelope, feeling David's hand on my shoulder. You okay, Mom? I don't know what I am. Later that night, alone in my room at David's house, I opened Clara's letter. Dear Mrs. Hayes, I've started this letter 100 times and deleted it 99, because there are no words that can undo what I did or make it okay. But my therapist says I need to try anyway, so here goes. I stole from you. Worse, I tried to make you think you were crazy to cover up my theft. I looked at you and saw an obstacle, not a person. I saw someone old and therefore worthless, someone whose dignity didn't matter, because what value does dignity have when you're poor and alone? I was wrong about everything. Working with Ethel and the others, I've learned that dignity isn't something you lose with age. It's something that gets stolen by people like me, people who decide that anyone who can't fight back doesn't deserve respect. Every day I sit with these seniors and listen to their stories, and I see you in their faces. Every time someone tells me about a child who stole from them or a caregiver who exploited them, I remember that I did worse. I did it deliberately, systematically, and without remorse. I can't undo any of it. But I can try to do better going forward. I can be someone who protects instead of praise. I can use the empathy I should have had all along to help people instead of hurt them. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to try to change. But I'm trying anyway, because the alternative is remaining the person who could look at someone's grandmother and see nothing but an opportunity. Thank you for not sending me to prison. Thank you for giving me a chance to become someone better. I promise I won't waste it. Clara. I read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. Was it genuine? Was Clara really changing, or was this just another performance, more sophisticated gaslighting designed to make me lower my guard? I didn't know. Maybe I'd never know. But I thought about Dorothy's grandson, who'd seemed genuinely remorseful and was paying back what he'd stolen. I thought about the dozens of families we'd helped reconcile through mediation and boundaries and accountability. I thought about how many times I'd seen people surprise themselves by being better than they thought they could be. Maybe Clara was capable of that too. Maybe not. But either way, I wasn't going to let her redemption arc become my responsibility. She could change or not change. She could become better or stay terrible. That was her choice, her work, her journey. Mine was different. Mine was about building something good from the wreckage of what she'd destroyed. Mine was about helping other people reclaim their dignity the way I'd reclaimed mine. I put Clara's letter in a drawer and went to bed. Tomorrow we had 12 intake appointments scheduled. 12 more people who needed someone to believe them, to fight for them, to remind them that being old didn't mean being disposable. That was my purpose now. Not revenge, not forgiveness, not even justice in the traditional sense. Just the simple, stubborn insistence that every person deserves dignity, no matter how old they are, or how poor they've become, or how many people have betrayed them. Clara had taught me that lesson by being its opposite, and now I was teaching it to everyone who walked through Grace Hand's Foundation's doors, one story, one client, one reclaimed life at a time. The drawer where I'd put Clara's letter stayed closed for 3 weeks. Every morning I'd see it while getting dressed, and every morning I'd tell myself today wasn't the day to think about forgiveness or redemption or whatever complicated thing was happening between us. Then Ethel died. Diana Chen called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice thick with tears. "Mrs. Hayes, I thought you should know. Ethel Morrison passed away last night. Heart failure. Clara was with her. Clara was there. She's been visiting Ethel every day after her required hours. Yesterday evening, Ethel asked Clara to stay while she called her son one last time. The son hung up on her, said he was busy. Ethel had a heart attack 20 minutes later. Clara held her hand until the ambulance arrived." I sat down slowly. "Is Clara okay?" "No. She's devastated. She keeps saying she should have done more, should have convinced the son to come, should have somehow prevented this. That's not her responsibility." I told her that. She's not listening. "Hayes, I know this is asking a lot, but would you consider talking to her? She respects you even if she's terrified of you." "I'm not her therapist, Diana." "I know. But you're someone who understands what it's like to be invisible to your own family. Maybe that's what she needs to hear right now." After we hung up, I sat at my desk staring at case files I couldn't focus on. Ethel Morrison, 90 years old, survived the Depression and World War II, and the deaths of her husband and daughter, only to die alone because her son was too busy to answer the phone. And Clara, who'd stolen from me without remorse, had been the one holding her hand at the end. I grabbed my keys. The senior center was quiet when I arrived. Diana met me at the entrance, relief crossing her face. "She's in the garden, hasn't moved in 2 hours." Clara sat on a bench surrounded by roses, still wearing her volunteer vest, mascara streaked down her face. She looked up when she heard my footsteps and went pale. "Mrs. Hayes, I didn't know Diana called you. I'm sorry, I'll leave." "Sit down, Clara." She sat. I lowered myself onto the bench beside her, my knees protesting. We sat in silence for a full minute, listening to traffic sounds from the street and a mockingbird in the oak tree overhead. "Tell me about Ethel," I said finally. Clara's voice came out broken. "She was a teacher, taught second grade for 40 years. She had 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. She loved crossword puzzles and hated lima beans and always wore this pearl necklace her husband gave her on their 50th anniversary. You learned all that in a few months. I learned it in a few weeks. She loved talking if anyone would listen. Her son visits once a year on Christmas. Her daughters moved to California decades ago. The grandchildren send cards sometimes. She was alone except for the staff here and the volunteers. And you." Clara's face crumpled. "I was too late. By the time I met her, she'd already spent years being ignored. I gave her a few months of attention and thought that mattered. But it didn't. She still died alone, calling a son who wouldn't pick up the phone. She didn't die alone. You were there. But I'm nobody. I'm just the woman who stole from you doing court-ordered community service. I'm not family. I'm not anyone who matters. I turned to look at her directly. Clara, do you know what Ethel told me the one time I visited? Her eyes widened. You visited Ethel last month. I wanted to see the woman who'd made such an impression on you. I paused, remembering that conversation. She told me that a young woman named Clara came to see her every day, that Clara listened to all her stories, even the ones she'd already told before, that Clara made her feel like her life had mattered to someone. I didn't know you visited. I didn't tell you. I wasn't ready to acknowledge that you might be genuinely changing. I took a breath. But Ethel said something else. She said, "That girl carries so much guilt, but she's trying so hard to be better. Tell her it's working." I didn't understand what she meant then. I think I do now. Clara was crying again silently this time. It doesn't feel like it's working. It feels like I'm just pretending to be a good person, while actual good people like Ethel die surrounded by my kind of selfishness. Her son is exactly who I used to be. Someone who saw their parent as an inconvenience instead of a human being. Yes, he is. How do you live with that, knowing you became someone who could discard people? I thought about that question, about the months I'd spent hating Clara, the satisfaction I'd felt watching her world fall apart, the confusion when she'd started actually trying to change. You live with it by doing better every single day. Not because it erases what you did, but because it means tomorrow there's one less person suffering what you inflicted on others. Is that enough? I don't know. Ask me in 4 more years when your community service is done. Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Mrs. Hayes, can I ask you something? What? Do you think about killing me? Sometimes I would if I were you. The question was so unexpected, I almost laughed. No, Clara, I don't think about killing you. What do you think about? I think about the 87 people we've helped at Grace Hand's Foundation. I think about Dorothy Jenkins' grandson, who's paying her back and going to therapy. I think about how your crime became the catalyst for something good, even though you didn't intend it. I paused. And sometimes when I'm feeling generous, I think that maybe people can change if the consequences are real enough and they're forced to see the damage they caused. Do you believe I've changed? I believe you're trying. Whether that's permanent or just another performance, time will tell. She nodded slowly. That's fair. That's more than fair, actually. We sat there until the sun started setting, painting the garden in shades of amber and rose. Finally, Clara stood. I should go. Thank you for coming, and for not lying to me about whether you trust me yet. Clara, she turned back. Ethel's funeral is Friday. You should go. Her son won't want me there. Her son doesn't get to decide who mourns her. You were there when he wasn't. You have as much right as anyone. She nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face, and walked away. I sat in the garden until full dark, thinking about Ethel and Clara and the complicated ways people hurt each other, and sometimes, just sometimes, found ways to heal. Ethel's funeral was small, 15 people in a chapel that could hold 100. Her son showed up late, left early, and spent the entire service checking his phone. Clara sat in the back row, silent and pale, holding a program she'd crumpled from gripping too hard. During the eulogy, the pastor asked if anyone wanted to share memories. Ethel's son said nothing. Her remaining friends shared brief stories. Then Clara stood. I didn't know Mrs. Morrison long, just a few months, but she taught me something important. Her voice shook but held. She taught me that attention is the most valuable thing you can give another person. Not money, not gifts, not grand gestures. Just your time, and your listening, and your care. She deserved that from everyone in her life. She got it from a few. I'm grateful I was one of them. She sat down. Ethel's son was staring at his phone, completely oblivious. After the service, I found Clara in the parking lot sitting in her car with her head on the steering wheel. You did good in there, I said through her open window. Her son didn't even hear me. He was texting someone. I know, some people never learn. How do you not become bitter, watching people waste the relationships they have, while people like Ethel would have given anything for that attention? I do become bitter. Then I go to work and help someone who isn't wasting their relationships. It doesn't fix the Ethels of the world, but it helps. Clara looked up at me. Do you need more volunteers at Grace Hands? I know I'm still doing my court-ordered hours here, but I have evenings free. I could answer phones or file or whatever you need. You want to volunteer for the organization you created by stealing from... I want to do something that matters, and I'm good at pretending to care about people. Except now, I'm not pretending anymore, and I don't know what to do with that. I studied her. She looked exhausted, wrung out nothing like the polished woman who'd stolen my money and called me senile. Fine. Tuesday and Thursday evenings 6 to 9. You answer intake calls and data entry. No client contact yet. Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. Don't thank me. Just show up and do the work. She showed up. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the next 3 months, Clara sat at a desk in our office answering phones and entering data. She never complained, never asked for special treatment, never tried to work directly with clients, even though I could see her watching the intake interviews with something like hunger. She's good at this, Amelia observed one evening. Fast, accurate professional with the callers. If I didn't know her history, I'd hire her full-time. You do know her history. I know. I'm just saying. In month 8 of Clara's community service, everything changed. Patricia Weinstein showed up at Grace Hands Foundation unannounced wearing a Chanel suit and an expression that could freeze vodka. Our receptionist tried to stop her, but Patricia walked straight to my office. Mrs. Hayes, we need to talk. I don't recall inviting you, Mrs. Weinstein. Nevertheless, she sat down without being asked. My daughter has been working here. She volunteers in the evenings as part of her rehabilitation. She's become obsessed with this work. She talks about nothing else. Her therapist says she's developed what he calls compensatory attachment, trying to fix her guilt by fixing strangers. And you're concerned because I want my daughter back. The real Clara, not this guilty shell who spends every waking hour trying to atone for mistakes that are in the past. I leaned back in my chair. Mrs. Weinstein, those mistakes destroyed my life for 8 months. They're not in the past for me. They're very present. Clara has paid you back every penny plus damages. She's completed over 300 hours of community service. She's been in therapy for 9 months. At what point does punishment become cruelty? At the point where she's learned that other people have value beyond what they can provide her. Patricia's eyes flashed. You want her to suffer forever because you suffered temporarily. I want her to change permanently because what she did wasn't temporary. I stood. Your daughter made me question my sanity. She stole my identity, my money, and my dignity. Then she tried to convince my son I was too senile to know what was real. The fact that she's uncomfortable facing the consequences of that doesn't move me. She could have gone to prison. We gave you everything you asked for. No, Mrs. Weinstein. You gave me what I demanded in exchange for not pursuing criminal charges. There's a difference. And if Clara finds this work difficult or emotionally challenging good, it means she's finally understanding what she did. I could file a motion to have her community service requirements reduced, undue emotional hardship. Try it. I'll bring every client we've helped to court to testify about the real emotional hardship of being exploited by family members. See who the judge believes. Patricia stood slowly. You've become quite hard, Mrs. Hayes. Yes, I have. Your daughter taught me that. Tell her thank you. After Patricia left, I sat in my office shaking with adrenaline and anger. Who was she to demand I make things easier on Clara? Who was she to decide that 9 months of consequences was enough for a year of systematic fraud? My phone rang. David. Mom, Patricia Weinstein just called me, said you're being cruel to Clara. Did she? She wants me to convince you to let Clara reduce her community service hours. What did you tell her? I told her that Clara stole $400,000 from me and that if Mom wants her doing community service until she's 90, I support that decision. I felt some of the tension ease. Thank you. Mom, are you okay? Patricia made it sound like you're torturing Clara. I'm giving her the opportunity to become a better person. If that feels like torture, she can take it up with the judge who approved our agreement." That night, Clara came in for her volunteer shift. She looked nervous, kept glancing at my office like she expected me to throw her out. "Your mother was here today," I said when she couldn't seem to focus on the data entry. Clara's hands stilled on the keyboard. "I know. She called me afterward, said you were unreasonable and cruel." "Do you think I'm being cruel?" She was quiet for a long moment. "No, I think you're being exactly as kind as I deserve. Your mother wants me to reduce your community service hours, says this work is causing you undue emotional hardship. My mother wants me to go back to being someone who doesn't think about consequences, someone who can steal from people and sleep soundly." Clara turned to face me. "Mrs. Hayes, this work is hard. Listening to stories like yours, seeing what people like me do to vulnerable people, it's devastating. But it's supposed to be. If it wasn't hard, I wouldn't be learning anything." "Your mother seems to think you've learned enough." "My mother never wanted me to learn anything. She wanted to pay you to go away so we could pretend nothing happened. But something did happen. I became a person who could look at someone's grandmother and see a bank account instead of a human being. That's not something you fix in 9 months. So, what do you want, Clara?" "I want to keep doing this work. Not because the court says I have to, but because it's the first thing I've ever done that feels meaningful. And I want to stop being someone who needs to steal from others to feel valuable." I studied her carefully. She looked tired, older than her 32 years. Nothing like the glamorous woman who'd stolen my identity. "Fine. But your mother comes here again trying to negotiate on your behalf. I'm filing a restraint order. This is between you and me, not you and your family's lawyers. Deal." The weeks after Patricia's visit brought unexpected developments. Clara started attending our support group sessions, not as a facilitator, but as an observer. She'd sit in the back of the room and listen to victims tell their stories, and I'd watch her face crumble a little more each time. One evening, after a particularly brutal session where an 85-year-old man described his daughter emptying his accounts, Clara came to my office. "How do you do this every day? Listen to these stories without wanting to burn the world down." "Some days I do want to burn the world down. Then I remember burning doesn't rebuild." I used to be that daughter, the one who saw her parents as obstacles or resources. My mother taught me that people were either useful or irrelevant. And now I understand why you didn't send me to prison. Because prison would have let me stay angry at you for ruining my life. This way I have to face what I did every single day. Is it working?" Clara looked at me, her eyes red and exhausted. "I don't sleep well anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see your face when David asked about the money. The confusion then, the realization, then the way you just went quiet, like you were trying to disappear." "I was trying to disappear. I thought if I was small enough, maybe you'd leave me alone." "God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it. Tell me in 3 years when your service is done. Maybe by then your sorry will mean something." Month 10 brought a crisis. One of our clients, a 79-year-old woman named Ruth, called in hysterics. Her son had just served her with eviction papers claiming he needed to sell her house to pay his debts. The house she'd lived in for 53 years, the house she and her late husband had bought with their savings. "He can't do this," Ruth sobbed into the phone. "It's my house. My name is on the deed." I put her on speaker so Amelia could hear. "Ruth, what exactly do the papers say?" "They say I have 60 days to vacate, that the house is being sold to settle his business debts. But I don't understand how he can sell my house." "He can't unless he has some legal claim to it. Did you ever add his name to the deed?" "He said I should, for estate planning. He said it would make things easier when I died." Amelia and I exchanged looks. "Ruth, when did you add his name?" "Last year. He brought the papers to me at the hospital after my hip surgery. Said I needed to sign them while I could still think clearly." "And you signed without a lawyer present?" "He said it was just a formality, that I'd still own the house his name was just on there for after I passed. Classic fraud. Son gets mother to sign over partial ownership while she's medicated and vulnerable, then claims he needs to sell to cover his debts. Ruth, we're going to fight this. Don't sign anything else. We'll get you a lawyer immediately." After we hung up, I found Clara standing in the doorway. She'd been listening. "That son is going to make his mother homeless to pay his gambling debts," she said quietly. "I overheard him on the phone last week when he dropped off some papers. He was telling someone he'd finally figured out how to access the equity. You knew about this and didn't tell us. I wasn't sure it was the same Ruth. We have 3 Ruths. But yes, I should have said something. I'm sorry." Amelia started gathering files. "We need to move fast. If that house sale goes through, Ruth is on the street." "I can help," Clara said. "I know a forensic accountant who owes me a favor. If the son is using the house to cover gambling debts, there will be records. We can prove he defrauded her while she was incapacitated." I looked at her. "Why would a forensic accountant owe you a favor?" Clara's face colored. "Because I used to date him before I married David. We ended on good terms. He'll help if I ask." "Make the call." Within 3 hours, Clara's ex-boyfriend Marcus was sitting in our office reviewing Ruth's case. He was methodical, thorough, and completely outraged by what Ruth's son had done. "This is textbook elder financial abuse. She signed those papers while on pain medication after major surgery. Any halfway decent lawyer will get this thrown out." "Can you prove it?" Amelia asked. "I can prove her son visited her exactly once at the hospital the day she signed the papers, then didn't visit again for 6 months. I can prove he refinanced the house 3 times in the last year, each time pulling out equity. I can prove he has outstanding gambling debts totaling over $200,000. And I can prove the buyer of the house is his bookie's shell company." "How fast can you put this together?" "Give me 48 hours. Marcus worked through the night. Clara stayed with him, pulling documents, making calls, tracking down records. I watched them work together with easy familiarity and saw a version of Clara I'd never witnessed before. Focused, competent, genuinely invested in helping someone with no benefit to herself. 2 days later, we walked into court with a folder 4 inches thick. Ruth's son showed up with a suit that probably cost $3,000 and a smirk that said he thought this was already won. The hearing lasted 20 minutes. Marcus presented evidence of fraud, coercion, and exploitation. Ruth's son stammered excuses. The judge ruled the deed transfer invalid, restored the house to Ruth's sole ownership, and ordered her son to pay court costs. "And son," the judge said, his voice hard as stone, "if I see you in my courtroom again for anything resembling elder abuse, you'll be leaving in handcuffs. Do we understand each other?" Ruth's son left without looking at his mother. Ruth stayed crying in relief, holding my hand like I'd saved her life. "How can I ever thank you?" she asked. "By living in that house for as long as you want. And if your son contacts you again, call us immediately." Outside the courthouse, Clara stood alone, watching cars pass. I walked over. "You did good work on this case." "Marcus did the work. I just helped." "You called him. You stayed up for 48 hours pulling records. You cared enough to fight for someone you barely know." Clara turned to look at me. "Do you know what I thought when I heard Ruth's story? I thought that could have been you. If I'd been smarter, I would have tried to get you to sign over your house. I would have taken everything until there was nothing left. But you didn't. Only because I didn't think of it. Not because I had any moral line I wouldn't cross. Clara, the person who would have done that, isn't the person standing here. Maybe you haven't changed as much as you think you need to, but you've changed enough to matter." She wiped her eyes. "Is that forgiveness?" "No, it's acknowledgement that you're trying. Forgiveness is something else, something I'm still working on." "Fair enough." We stood there watching the traffic, 2 women connected by theft and consequence, and the complicated process of becoming better than you were. "Mrs. Hayes," Clara said finally, "after my community service is done, can I keep volunteering? Not because I have to, but because I want to. Ask me in 2 years. We'll see who you are by then. And if I'm still trying, then maybe we'll have something to build on." That night, I opened the drawer where I'd put Clara's letter months ago. I read it again, looking for signs of manipulation or performance, but all I found were the words of someone who'd finally understood what she'd done and was terrified of who she'd been. I took out a piece of paper and wrote a response. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but something. Clara. You asked me once if trying to change was enough. I don't have that answer yet. But I'm starting to think that the question itself might be more important than the answer, because people who don't care about being better never ask the question at all. Keep trying, keep showing up, keep letting the work break your heart open until you understand that other people's pain matters as much as your own comfort. Do that for 2 more years, and maybe we'll both know if redemption is real or just another story we tell ourselves. Margaret. I sealed the letter, addressed it to Clara's apartment, and dropped it in the mail. Then I went home, made tea, and sat in David's perfect living room thinking about Ethel and Ruth and Dorothy and the dozens of others we'd helped. Thinking about how Clara's crime had somehow become the foundation for helping people she'd never met. Thinking that maybe, just maybe, justice and redemption weren't opposites after all. Maybe they were just 2 different paths to the same place. 2 years and 3 months after that Mother's Day confrontation, I stood in front of a crowd of 300 people at the Dallas Convention Center, accepting an award I never wanted and definitely didn't deserve. The Texas Elder Advocacy Award goes to Margaret Hayes, founder of Grace Hands Foundation, for her tireless work protecting senior citizens from financial exploitation. The applause was deafening. David stood in the front row, beaming with pride. Amelia was wiping her eyes. Reverend Cole was clapping so hard I worried about his arthritis. And in the back row, almost hidden behind a pillar, Clara sat alone. I gave my speech, the same one I'd given dozens of times now. We'd helped over 400 people, recovered $6 million in stolen assets, prosecuted 27 cases of elder abuse, trained 200 social workers and law enforcement officers to recognize the signs, numbers that should have felt triumphant but just felt necessary. After the ceremony, reporters wanted interviews, local politicians wanted photos, donors wanted to discuss expanding to other cities. I smiled and shook hands and made small talk until my face hurt from the effort. Then I saw Clara trying to leave through a side exit. "Clara, wait." She turned, looking guilty. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have come. I just wanted to see, and then I figured I should leave before anyone recognized me. Your community service ended 4 months ago. You fulfilled all 500 hours, completed the rehabilitation program, paid back every penny. Why are you still hiding? Because people remember. Last week, someone recognized me at the grocery store, called me a thief loud enough for the whole store to hear. She wasn't wrong, but it still hurt. Come to my office tomorrow, 3 o'clock. I have something to discuss with you." "Mrs. Hayes, if this is about me volunteering, I appreciate the offer, but I understand if you don't want me associated with the foundation publicly. The optics aren't great." 3 o'clock, Clara. Don't make me hunt you down." She showed up at 2:45, nervous and fidgeting with her car keys. I waited until exactly 3, then invited her into my office and closed the door. "Your community service is done. Your probation ends next month. Legally, you fulfilled all your obligations." "Yes." "So why are you still coming here 3 nights a week to answer phones?" Clara looked at her hands. "Because it's the only time I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Because going home to my empty apartment and watching TV feels like going back to being the person I was before. Because here, at least I'm useful." "You've been useful for 2 years, Clara. The question is whether you want to be more than useful." "I don't understand." I pulled out a folder and slid it across my desk. "We're expanding, opening offices in Houston and Austin. We need someone to train new staff, develop protocols, oversee operations. Someone who understands this work from the inside. Someone who knows what it's like to be both the abuser and the reformed." Clara opened the folder, her eyes widening as she read. "You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a purpose. $60,000 a year, salary, full benefits, and the opportunity to spend the rest of your life making sure what you did to me never happens to anyone else." "Mrs. Hayes, I can't accept this. People will say you're being naive, that I'll just steal again, that a leopard can't change its spots." People said a lot of things when I started this foundation. They said I was too old, too poor, too damaged to help anyone. I proved them wrong. Now you get to prove them wrong too. What if I fail? What if I mess up, or can't handle it, or fall back into old patterns? Then you'll have failed while trying to do something good instead of succeeding at doing something terrible. That's still progress. Clara was crying now, silent tears running down her face. "Why are you doing this? After everything I did to you, why would you give me this chance?" I thought about that question, about all the easy answers I could give, because forgiveness was the right thing to do, because everyone deserves a second chance, because holding grudges takes too much energy. But the truth was messier than that. Because 2 years ago, you sat with Ethel Morrison while she died, and you've carried that with you every day since. Because you stayed up for 48 hours to save Ruth's house when you could have just clocked your volunteer hours and gone home. Because every client who walks through that door reminds you of me, and instead of running from that guilt, you've learned to sit with it. I leaned forward. But mostly because I spent 8 months believing I didn't matter anymore, that being old and poor meant being disposable. And you're spending every day now proving that people can matter again even after they've thrown away their own value. If I can reclaim my dignity after what you did, you can reclaim yours by helping others reclaim theirs. That's very generous. It's not generous, Clara. It's strategic. You're one of the few people who truly understands both sides of this equation. You know how abusers think because you were one. And you know how victims feel because you've spent 2 years listening to their pain. That makes you uniquely qualified for this work, even if it makes some people uncomfortable. It's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. Good. Comfortable people rarely change anything. Clara wiped her eyes, took a shaky breath. If I accept this, I want to be transparent about my past. No hiding, no covering up. New clients deserve to know who's helping them. Agreed. We'll put your story on the website, let you decide how much to share. And if someone doesn't want to work with me because of what I did, then they work with someone else. This isn't about forcing anyone to forgive you. It's about giving you the opportunity to be useful to people who choose to trust you. When do I start? Monday, 8 a.m. And Clara, you're going to mess up sometimes. Everyone does. The difference between the old you and the new you is what you do when you mess up. The old you would have lied and blamed someone else. The new you better own it and fix it. I will. I promise. Don't promise me. Just do it. She left with the folder clutched to her chest like it was precious, and I sat alone in my office, wondering if I'd just made the best decision of my life or the worst mistake. David called 10 minutes later. "Mom, did you really just hire Clara?" "You heard about that fast. She called me crying, said she couldn't believe you'd trust her with this, asked if I thought she could do it." "What did you tell her?" "I told her you don't make impulsive decisions, so if you hired her, you believe she's capable." Then I asked if she was going to make me regret not sending her to prison. And she said she'd spend every day making sure we never regretted giving her another chance. Then she thanked me for the divorce because it forced her to figure out who she was without money or status or anyone to manipulate. I smiled despite myself. That almost sounds healthy. It almost sounds like she's actually changed, which is terrifying because I spent so long hating her and now I don't know what to feel. Welcome to my world. I've been living in that confusion for 2 years. Are you sure about this? Mom hiring her is one thing, but making her the face of expansion, that's a huge risk. The entire foundation was built on risk. I risked believing that justice could be more than punishment. That risk paid off. Now I'm risking that redemption is real. We'll see if this one pays off too. Clara's first day was chaos. Half the staff was thrilled to have her expertise. The other half threatened to quit. We had an emergency meeting where people said things like, "How can we help abuse victims if we're enabling their abuser?" And "This sends the wrong message about accountability." Clara sat through it all, pale but composed, letting people vent their anger and fear and disappointment. Finally, she stood. "Everything you're saying is valid. I did enable abuse. I was an abuser. And hiring me probably does send a confusing message." She paused. "But here's what I know after 2 years of community service. Most abusers aren't monsters. They're people who've convinced themselves that what they're taking isn't really stealing, that who they're hurting doesn't really matter. They're people who need to be confronted with the reality of their actions in a way that can't be dismissed or rationalized. And you think you can do that? One of the social workers, Janet, was practically vibrating with anger. I think I'm one of the few people who can look an abuser in the eye and say, I know exactly what you're thinking because I thought it too, and here's why you're wrong. I can't undo what I did, but I can use what I learned to stop other people from doing what I did. That's convenient logic. It's survival logic, because the alternative is spending the rest of my life hiding from what I was, and that doesn't help anyone. Janet stood abruptly and walked out. 2 other staff members followed her, but the rest stayed, and by the end of the meeting, we had a fragile agreement. Clara would work primarily on training and development, not direct client services. She'd be transparent about her history with anyone she worked with, and if any client or staff member was uncomfortable working with her, accommodations would be made. That went better than expected, Amelia said after everyone left. Janet's going to quit, I said. Probably. But Janet was already looking for another job. She wants to work in policy, not direct services. Clara was just an excuse. Clara appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Hayes, I think I should resign. I'm causing division, and that's the last thing this organization needs. Sit down. She sat. Change always causes division. People who are comfortable with how things are will always resist people who challenge that comfort. If you quit now, you're teaching them that discomfort is a valid reason to reject redemption. But if I stay, people will leave. Some people will leave. Other people, people who believe in second chances and complicated forgiveness, will join us because of your presence. We'll end up with a stronger team that's aligned with our actual values, which are that everyone deserves dignity and everyone deserves the chance to become better than they were. Victims deserve justice. Abusers deserve consequences. And sometimes, if those consequences are real enough and lasting enough, abusers deserve the opportunity to transform into advocates. Clara nodded slowly. I won't let you down. You will absolutely let me down. Probably multiple times. Just make sure when you do, you own it and fix it. That's the deal. 3 weeks later, Janet resigned. She wrote a long email about moral compromise and enabling harmful behavior. 2 other staff members left with her, but 5 new people applied specifically because they'd heard Clara's story and wanted to work somewhere that believed in redemption. We hired 3 of them. One was a former public defender who'd specialized in elder abuse cases. Another was a financial counselor who'd helped her own mother recover from exploitation. The third was a man in his 40s who'd stolen from his parents 20 years ago, served time, and spent the last decade trying to atone. We're building something different here, Amelia observed. An organization run by people who understand both sides. Victims who became advocates. Abusers who became reformed. It's messy and complicated and probably controversial as hell. So basically on brand for us, I said. Basically on brand for you. You've never done anything the easy way. That night, David took me to dinner at the same Italian restaurant where I'd met Dr. Wu 2 years earlier. Halfway through the meal, he set down his fork and looked at me seriously. Mom, I need to tell you something. I'm seeing someone. That's wonderful. What's her name? His name is Marcus. I blinked. Marcus, as in Clara's forensic accountant, Marcus. We started talking after the Ruth case, became friends, then more than friends. I wanted to tell you earlier, but I wasn't sure how you'd react. How would I react, David? I spent 40 years doing accounting in Texas. You think I never worked with gay people. You think your father and I never discussed the possibility that you might be gay. You discussed it. Of course we discussed it. You were obsessed with musical theater and interior design magazines. Your father said, Margaret, our son might be gay and that's fine, but he's definitely going to have excellent taste in home decor. David laughed a real surprised laugh. I can't believe Dad said that. Your father was a factory worker who loved you more than anything. He would have loved you if you were gay straight or decided you wanted to live on Mars. I reached across the table and took his hand. Are you happy? Extremely. Marcus is kind and funny and brilliant, and he thinks it's adorable that I stress organize my closet by color and season. Then I'm happy. When do I get to meet him officially as your boyfriend, instead of just Clara's ex helping with cases? Next week he's nervous about meeting you. Tell him I'm significantly less scary than my reputation suggests. Mom, you faced down Clara's lawyers, her mother, and a Texas judge. Your reputation is accurate. We both laughed, and I felt something loosen in my chest. David had found someone who made him happy. Grace's hands was expanding. Clara was transforming. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like the chaos was settling into something sustainable. Then Patricia Weinstein called. Mrs. Hayes, I wanted to inform you that I'm filing a lawsuit against Grace Hands Foundation for exploiting my daughter's guilt and emotional trauma. I sat down slowly. Excuse me. Clara is fragile. She's been in therapy for years trying to recover from the trauma of your public persecution. Forcing her to relive that trauma by working with abuse victims is causing severe psychological damage. Clara chose to work here. She's an adult who made an informed decision. She chose to work there because you've conditioned her to believe she needs your approval to have value. That's emotional manipulation, and it needs to stop. Mrs. Weinstein, with all due respect, go to hell. I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I let it go to voicemail, then again, and again. Finally, I answered. Patricia, if you call me one more time, I'm filing a harassment complaint. Mrs. Hayes, this is Marcus Chen, Clara's ex. We met during the Ruth case. Oh, God, I'm sorry. I thought you were Clara's mother again. Patricia called you too. She called me an hour ago, threatening to sue if I don't convince you to fire Clara. Why is she doing this? Because Clara's been happy for the first time in years, and Patricia can't control her anymore. She wants Clara back in the family fold, dependent on them again, grateful for their money and influence. Clara's not a child. No, but she's Patricia's child, and Patricia's been treating her like a failure project that needs to be fixed. Clara working at your foundation, being independent and purposeful, that challenges Patricia's entire narrative about what happened. What narrative? That you're a vindictive old woman who ruined Clara's life out of spite, that Clara's the real victim here, that everything would be fine if you'd just taken the settlement and stayed quiet. I was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Marcus, can I ask you something personal? You dated Clara before David. Did you see the signs of who she'd become? No, and yes. She was always a little ruthless, always focused on status and appearances, but she was also fun and smart and seemed genuinely loving. I thought the ruthlessness was ambition. I didn't realize it was something darker. Do you think she's really changed? I think she's terrified of becoming who she was. Whether that terror translates into permanent change, I don't know. But the effort seems real. That's what scares me. The effort seems real, and I'm starting to believe it, and if I'm wrong, I've put victims at risk. Mrs. Hayes, can I tell you what David told me? He said his mother spent 8 months eating donated soup rather than ask for help because she didn't want to be a burden. That's the kind of pride that builds character. And he said the only reason he has any relationship with you now is because you chose grace over vengeance. That's the kind of wisdom that changes lives. He says it all the time. He's incredibly proud of you. After we hung up, I sat in the dark office, thinking about Patricia's lawsuit and Clara's reformation and whether I'd made a terrible mistake trusting someone who'd betrayed me so completely. My phone buzzed. A text from Clara. My mother called you. I'm so sorry. I told her to stop, but she won't listen. If you want me to resign to make this easier, I will. I typed back, Don't resign. Your mother doesn't get to control your life anymore. See you Monday. The lawsuit turned out to be mostly hot air. Patricia filed paperwork claiming emotional damages and exploitation, but her lawyers quietly withdrew it 3 weeks later after Amelia demonstrated that Clara was a willing employee with glowing performance reviews and zero evidence of coercion. Patricia's trying to control the narrative, Amelia explained. If Clara's transformation is real, it means Patricia failed as a mother by raising someone capable of elder abuse. But if Clara's still a victim of your manipulation, Patricia gets to be the protective mother instead of the woman who taught her daughter that people are objects. That's depressingly insightful. I've been practicing family law for 30 years. Every dysfunctional family has the same underlying dynamic. Someone needs to be the villain so everyone else can be the victim. Clara's first major project was developing training materials for the Houston office. She threw herself into the work creating comprehensive modules on recognizing financial abuse, conducting sensitive victim interviews, and most controversially, rehabilitating abusers. Most programs focus exclusively on punishing abusers, she explained during a staff meeting. But punishment without rehabilitation just creates better criminals. If we can intervene early, show people the real impact of their actions before they're fully committed to that identity, we might prevent abuse before it escalates. That's very optimistic, one of the new social workers said. It's necessary optimism. Because if we believe people can't change, what's the point of any of this? 6 months into Clara's employment, we got a case that tested everyone's convictions. A 40-year-old woman named Stephanie had been systematically draining her mother's retirement account. The mother, Joan, was 72 and had advanced MS. She'd discovered the theft when she tried to access money for medical equipment and found her account empty. "I want my daughter arrested," Joan said during intake. "I want her in prison for as long as possible." "Mrs. Mitchell, before we pursue criminal charges, would you be willing to try mediation? Let your daughter understand the impact of what she's done." "What's the point? She knew I was sick. She knew I needed that money. She stole it anyway." Sometimes people don't connect their actions to real consequences until they're forced to face them directly. "Would you be willing to let us try?" Joan agreed reluctantly. We scheduled a mediation session with Stephanie, her lawyer, Joan, and surprisingly, Clara volunteered to co-facilitate. "Are you sure?" I asked. "This might be too close to your own story." "That's exactly why I should do it, because I know what Stephanie's thinking right now. She's thinking her mother is old and sick anyway, that the money would have gone to medical bills eventually, that she needed it more. I thought all those things. Someone needs to tell her why that's wrong in a way she can't rationalize away." The mediation was brutal. Stephanie came in defensive, her lawyer doing most of the talking, explaining financial hardship and medical bills and desperation. Then Clara spoke. "Stephanie, I'm Clara Hayes. 3 years ago, I stole $113,000 from my mother-in-law and my ex-husband. I forged signatures, opened fake accounts, and when I got caught, I tried to convince everyone that my mother-in-law was senile and confused." Stephanie's lawyer tried to interrupt, but Clara kept going. "I told myself all the same things you're telling yourself, that I needed the money more, that they'd never miss it, that I'd pay it back eventually, that they were old and wouldn't need money much longer anyway. Every single rationalization you're using right now, I used 3 years ago." "I'm not like you," Stephanie said. "My mother's medical condition is real. I'm not stealing for designer clothes." "You're right. Your reasons are better than mine were, but the result is the same. Your mother now can't afford the equipment that would let her stay in her home. She's going to have to move into assisted living years before she needs to because you emptied her safety net. Is that better or worse than stealing for designer clothes?" Stephanie's face crumbled. "She could come live with me." "On what money?" "The money you stole from her." Clara's voice was gentle but relentless. "Stephanie, I'm not here to make you feel terrible. I'm here to tell you what happens next if you keep lying to yourself. You'll rationalize this theft, then you'll rationalize the next one, and the next. Until one day you're sitting in a room like this explaining to strangers how you became someone who could steal from your own sick mother. What do you want me to say? I want you to look at your mother and see a human being who's scared and sick and just had her safety stolen by the person she trusted most. I want you to understand that her disability doesn't make her less deserving of dignity. And I want you to decide right now whether you're going to be someone who helps her or someone who exploits her vulnerability." The room was silent. Then Stephanie turned to her mother. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was drowning and I grabbed onto you and I didn't care that I was pulling you under." "Sorry doesn't pay for my wheelchair," Joan said, but her voice was softer. Over the next 2 hours, we worked out a payment plan. Stephanie would return what she could, immediately sell her car to cover more, and pay the rest over 5 years with interest. She'd also enter the financial rehabilitation program and do community service. No criminal charges, Joan asked. Not unless she violates the agreement, Amelia confirmed. After everyone left, Joan pulled Clara aside. Thank you. I don't know if my daughter will really change, but at least now she knows what she did was real harm, not just numbers on a screen. Clara nodded, her eyes wet. I hope she does change, because living with what I did is hard, but it's better than living with who I was. That evening, I found Clara sitting in the parking lot, staring at nothing. You did good work today. I made Stephanie cry. You made her see the truth. That's not the same as being cruel. It felt cruel. The truth often does. That doesn't make it wrong. Clara looked at me. Mrs. Hayes, do you ever regret not sending me to prison? Sometimes, usually when I'm tired or dealing with a particularly brutal case. But then I see you do what you did today, and I remember why I chose this path. Because you believe in redemption. Because I believe in options. Prison would have been the easy answer. This is harder, messier, more complicated. But it's also created something that wouldn't exist otherwise. An organization run by the morally compromised. An organization run by people who understand that morality is complicated and change is possible, and sometimes the best advocates are the ones who've been on both sides. Clara smiled faintly. That's very diplomatic. I'm old. I've earned the right to be diplomatic. 3 years after that Mother's Day confrontation, Grace Hand's Foundation had offices in 3 cities, a staff of 42, and had helped over 700 people. We'd recovered $15 million in stolen assets. We'd trained 500 professionals in recognizing elder abuse. We'd changed state laws to make financial exploitation easier to prosecute. And Clara had worked every single day, showing up even when people protested her presence, even when she got hate mail, even when her mother tried to manipulate her back into the family fold. You know what the weird thing is? She said one day while we were reviewing expansion plans. I make less money now than I've ever made as an adult. I live in a studio apartment and drive a 10-year-old Honda. I have no designer clothes, no expensive jewelry, no status symbols at all. And I'm happier than I've ever been, which makes no sense because I used to think money and status were what made life worth living. Turns out purpose is more valuable than Prada. Turns out being useful to people is better than being envied by people. We worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Clara asked, Mrs. Hayes, have you forgiven me? I set down my pen and thought about that question. 3 years ago, I would have said never. 2 years ago, I would have said maybe someday. A year ago, I would have said I'm working on it. I don't know if I've forgiven you completely, I said finally, but I've made peace with what happened. I've accepted that you're not the person you were, even though I'm still learning to trust the person you're becoming. Is that enough? It's more than I deserve. Probably, but deserve has nothing to do with it. Grace never does. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I drove to my old house, the one I'd left behind when I moved in with David. A young family lived there now. I could see toys in the yard, a swing set, laughter floating through open windows. I sat in my car looking at the place where Frank and I had built our life, where I'd raised David, where I'd spent 8 months being systematically robbed and gaslit. And I felt nothing but quiet gratitude. Gratitude that it had happened, as strange as that sounds. Because if Clara hadn't stolen from me, I'd still be eating donated soup and believing I didn't matter. If she hadn't gaslit me, I wouldn't have learned to trust my own mind again. If she hadn't forced me to fight back, I wouldn't have discovered I still had fight left in me. My phone rang. David. Mom, where are you? Marcus made dinner and you're supposed to be here. I'm at the old house. I'll be there in 20 minutes. You okay? Yeah, sweetheart, I'm good. Just saying goodbye to someone I used to be. When I arrived at David's house, which had slowly become our house over the past 3 years, Marcus greeted me with a hug and a glass of wine. We ate dinner on the patio, talking about work and life and David's latest project and Marcus's forensic accounting cases. Oh, I meant to tell you, Marcus said. Patricia Weinstein is getting remarried, some oil executive from Houston. Good for her. Clara's not going to the wedding. She told her mother that she's done pretending their relationship is something it's not. How'd Patricia take that? About as well as you'd expect. Lots of accusations about ingratitude and betrayal. Clara told her that real betrayal is teaching your daughter that people are objects. Then she hung up and blocked her mother's number. David laughed. I would have paid money to hear that conversation. Clara's growing a spine, I said. About time. Later, after Marcus went home and David went to bed, I sat on the patio watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere across the city, Clara was probably in her studio apartment, maybe reading case files or preparing training materials, or just sitting in the same kind of peaceful silence I was sitting in now. 3 years ago, she'd been the villain in my story. The thief, the liar, the woman who tried to steal my dignity along with my money. Now she was something more complicated. Not quite a friend, not quite forgiven, but someone whose presence in my life had somehow become necessary. Someone whose transformation had transformed me too, teaching me that grace was stronger than vengeance, and that the hardest person to offer redemption to was often the one who needed it most. I pulled out my phone and typed a message I'd been composing in my head for months. Clara, 3 years ago, you asked me if I liked the $5,000 you claimed to be giving me. Today I want to answer that question properly. No, I didn't like that money because I never received it. But what came from that theft, the foundation we built, the lives we've changed, the person you've become, and the person I've remembered how to be, those things I like very much. Thank you for stealing from me. It was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and somehow it led to some of the best. Life is strange that way. See you Monday. Margaret. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Mrs. Hayes, I don't know what to say, except that I'm crying in my apartment, and my neighbor probably thinks someone died. Thank you for giving me a chance to be better. Thank you for not giving up on grace, even when I gave you every reason to. And thank you for showing me that dignity isn't something you're born with or something money can buy. It's something you choose to keep, even when everything else is taken away. I'll see you Monday, and every Monday after that, for as long as you'll have me. Clara. I smiled and put the phone away. The Texas sky was doing that thing again, turning colors that didn't seem possible, like it was showing off for an audience of one. And maybe it was. Maybe the universe had been watching this whole messy story unfold and wanted to remind me that beautiful things can come from ugly circumstances, that pain can transform into purpose, and that sometimes the people who hurt us the worst can become the ones who help us heal. Or maybe it was just a pretty sunset. Either way, I sat there watching until the last light faded and the stars took over, thinking about Frank and how he'd always believed that people were worth saving, even when they didn't deserve it. You were right, I whispered to the darkness. Grace is harder than vengeance, but it builds something that lasts. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden that David had planted in memory of the one I'd left behind. And in that moment, surrounded by beauty that had grown from loss, I finally understood what forgiveness really meant. It didn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It didn't mean Clara deserved to be forgiven or that I was obligated to offer grace. It meant choosing to build something new from the broken pieces, instead of spending the rest of my life mourning what had been destroyed. It meant understanding that some stories don't have clean endings, just complicated middles that keep unfolding. It meant accepting that the woman who stole my money had also accidentally and against her will given me back my purpose. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. I finished my wine, went inside, and went to bed. Tomorrow, 7 new clients were scheduled at Grace Hands Foundation. 7 more people who needed someone to believe them, to fight for them, to remind them that being vulnerable didn't mean being disposable. And Clara would be there, showing up like she had every day for 3 years, still trying to earn redemption she'd probably never fully achieve. But trying was the point. Showing up was the work. And somewhere in the gap between the person she'd been and the person she was becoming lived the proof that change, however imperfect and incomplete, was still possible, even for people like Clara, especially for people like Clara. Because if someone who'd stolen my identity, my money, and my dignity could transform into someone who protected others from the same fate, then maybe there was hope for all of us. Maybe we were all just one choice away from becoming better than we were. And maybe that's what grace really meant. Not ignoring the harm someone caused, but giving them space to become someone who'd never cause that harm again. I fell asleep thinking about that, about grace and justice and the strange ways they intertwined, and dreamed of Frank smiling his approval from wherever good men go when they die. "You did good, Maggie," he said in the dream. "You built something beautiful from something broken. That's always been your gift." When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and somewhere in the city, Clara was probably already awake, preparing for another day of trying to be better. And I was ready to meet her there, still wary, still watching, still learning how to trust someone who'd betrayed me. But ready. That was enough. That had to be enough. Because some stories don't end with perfect forgiveness or complete redemption. They end with two imperfect people still showing up, still trying, still building something good from the wreckage of what came before. And honestly, that was better than any fairy tale ending could have been, because it was real.